Waking up in this bizarre world, I suddenly heard a robotic voice inside my head announcing that I had been synced up with some overpowered lord system supposedly engineered to make me the ultimate ruler across all realms, build a massive territory, and rack up sweet rewards. Though out of nowhere, the glitchy system crashed mid-sentence and went totally dead. No matter how hard I yelled out, I got zero response. At least the interface panel was still floating there, displaying my username, an empty territory slot, and one active talent, Night Summoning. I could call forth at least one night every single day. Pretty solid perk for a powerless dude, dropped into an unknown realm. I immediately triggered the ability, scoring a heavy cavalry warrior named Tai, standing nearly 2 meters tall. He was decked out in black iron armor trimmed with gold alongside a massive armored warhorse. He rolled up equipped with a heavy blade, a bow, and an iron spear. Dropping to one knee before me, he addressed me as my lord. He shared my exact facial features, giving me a comforting slice of home in this crazy place. Tai suddenly cut in with a warning, sensing some movement up ahead in the dense forest. Even though I heard nothing besides the wind and chirping birds, I totally trusted his instincts. Climbing up onto his warhorse, we rode out to check it out. Right in the middle, we stumbled upon a tiny village, where a mob of angry villagers had cornered a young girl, screaming to burn her alive while a guy named Alan spearheaded the chaos, branding her as a witch who supposedly lured a demon woman to their settlement and got 3 locals snatched away. The terrified girl, Alina, kept pleading her innocence, insisting that the demon woman had zero connection to her. Yet Alan completely shut her down by dragging local nobles into it. They had officially decreed that witches were the root cause behind the demon sightings, and who on earth would dare challenge the nobles before long? They had securely bound Alina to a pile of firewood. Having watched the whole spectacle play out, I found the entire situation completely low-key wild, scapegoating a random girl for monsters, just because some stuck-up nobles said so. At the same time, it hit me that this world actually featured witches and demon women, meaning I desperately needed some intel. Those clueless villagers were pretty much useless, yet that self-proclaimed witch probably held some actual answers. Right then and there at that exact instant, as the locals caught sight of Tai, his gleaming armor and weapons, they completely froze in their tracks. Even their local nobles lacked gear on that level. Dropping straight to his knees, Alan frantically tried to explain how they were merely burning a witch. One simple question was thrown his way by me. Was she actually seen summoning the demon woman with his own eyes? Stammering through his words, he confessed he hadn't seen a thing. He was just parroting whatever the nobles had claimed. That was all the proof I needed. Tai was told by me to drag the girl over here. Trying to intervene, Alan attempted to stop him only to get flicked aside effortlessly like it was nothing. Looking totally stunned, Alina offered me a word of thanks. Letting her know I had a few questions in mind, I asked if she'd be down for a quick chat. She looked genuinely shook that a noble would actually address her with such respect. Before any words could leave her mouth, a blood-curdling scream pierced the air from the village outskirts. The demon woman is pulling up. Panicked shrieks echoed, as villagers hollered that the demon woman had arrived. Glancing upward, a figure in a dark cloak came into view striding toward us while leaning heavily on a wooden staff. Swarms of butterflies danced wildly around her, instantly pointing a shaky finger straight at Alina. Alan resumed blaming her for luring in the dreaded demon woman. Crawling pathetically across the dirt, he begged me to execute Alina so the demon woman would finally back off. Shutting him down instantly, I told him to pipe down. Lowering my voice, Tai was asked if he could handle her easily. Flashing a grin, he claimed she was basically a total pushover. Hearing that gave me a major confidence boost. Stepping forward, I addressed the demon woman face-to-face. Finding a knight here caught her off guard for a second, prompting her to warn us against meddling in her business. Securing a few laborers from the village was all she wanted, though an inquiry needed to be made by me first, inquiring whether it was actually true that witches were responsible for attracting demon women. Bursting into laughter, she dismissed the notion entirely, claiming those witches were way too weak and totally insignificant for her to even care about. Their existence had zero to do with her showing up here. Drained from his face, Alan went completely blank, shattering his entire excuse to burn Alina alive. The fiendess herself had totally leveled the entire place. Even the rest of the villagers hung their heads down low in deep shame. When Alan still tried to push back and argue, the furious demon woman completely lost her cool, snapping that whoever dared to spread those lies about demon women being mixed up with witches totally deserved to get wasted right then, and their Alina dropped right down onto her shaking knees and begged me to please spare the townsfolk, pleading that they were just totally played and weren't actually evil at heart. Giving her a nod, I told her I got it before signaling Tai to step up and take the front line. The demon woman flashed a warning my way. That one single night wouldn't be enough to put a stop to her. Tai didn't even bother wasting breath on a reply, as he instantly flashed his blade and charged forward, The demon woman quickly chanted a dark spell to summon 10 monkey-like beasts, wielding heavy stone hammers through floating magic circles. Yet Tai sliced through every single one of them like paper, cleaving them clean in half with effortless single swings. And when one monster managed to get close enough to grab, he just crushed its skull with his bare fist, turning over to Alina. I couldn't help but ask if demon women were really this weak. She explained that this particular one was probably just low-tier trash, since way stronger demon women could actually summon full-blown dragons straight from the nether realms, not to mention wielding deadly offensive magic, capable of smoking even elite knights if they let their guard down for a second. That was when I dropped a crucial question on her, asking if she herself could pull off any magic spells. She admitted she had only just awakened as a witch, meaning she could only cast basic healing spells with zero offensive capability. A pure support healer. My eyes lit up instantly, because while I could summon knights on the daily, even the best knights always take hits in the heat of battle. Having someone around who could patch them up would totally multiply my squad's overall combat potency. Making up my mind right on the spot, I asked Alina if she'd be down to roll with me on my journey, leaving her staring right back at me in total disbelief. After all, witches in this kingdom were treated like cursed outcasts, with paranoid nobles fearing their weird abilities and spreading malicious propaganda to wipe them out completely. No noble in their right mind had ever offered to take a witch under their wing, yet she still answered with a firm yes, while nearby Tai efficiently finished off the last remaining creep, leaving the demon woman to panic and pivot straight into heavy vine magic, only for Tai to effortlessly stomp right through the overgrown roots with a fierce lunge. He rushed straight toward her, slashing furiously, only to watch her make a razor-thin escape by morphing her cloak into a pitch-black fog and vanishing completely. Screaming back at me, she swore she would never forget this and vowed to return. Not that I was stressing at all. Summoning at least one night daily was a total breeze for me. If she ever showed her face again, I'd lock her down and force some answers out of her. Stepping forward out of the crowd, the villagers dropped to their knees to offer their thanks. Playing nice was honestly the last thing on my mind. Gesturing sharply toward Alina, I cut them off and told them their gratitude belonged to her had it not been for her. Saving their skins wouldn't have been worth the effort. That instantly shut every single one of them up. Most of them looked genuinely mortified, cheeks burning red given that they were ready to barbecue her alive just moments prior. Though Alan was the sole exception, his expression remaining dark and bitter. Raising his voice once more, he tried to panic everyone by claiming that demonic witch would come back and spell total doom for the entire village. Disgust flashed across my face as I glared at him. I had honestly almost completely forgotten about this annoying pest. Panic setting in, Alan begged desperately for mercy, yet not a single villager lifted a finger to defend him. After all, he had practically coerced them into trying to burn the very person who ended up saving their lives. Without hesitation, I had him booted straight out of the settlement. Turning back to the crowd, I announced I'd be sticking around for a few days to handle that demonic woman personally. If she dared to show her face again, relief washed visibly over their faces. An elderly man stepped out from the assembly and introduced himself as Old White, the head of Blair Village. Guaranteeing full support, he promised the village would supply everything I needed during my stay. I dropped the bomb that I'd be lodging at Alina's place, and that she was officially under my absolute protection from then on. On behalf of the whole community, Old White issued a formal apology to Alina. Claiming she held no hard feelings, she brushed it off, though I didn't miss the telltale redness in her eyes. Having your own neighbors try to burn you alive at the stake is kind of a trauma you just don't bounce back from easily. Nestled on the eastern edge of the village sat Alina's humble cabin, comprising a meager 2 tiny rooms. Scented bundles of dried herbs and stacks of worn books cluttered the living space. While she felt deeply insecure about its cramped quarters, I found it tidy enough, which suited me just fine. Standing sentinel outside the doorway was Tai, as I prompted Alina to fill me in on how this world worked. A bewildered look crossed her features, wondering why an elite noble would ever ask a commoner for explanations. Quickly playing it off, I made up a quick cover story, claiming it was a mandatory trial she had to pass to lock down her gig as my attendant. She totally bought it, and here is the lowdown on what I picked up. This world is massive, yet Alina only knew about the tiny kingdom of Lane. It features a single capital hub known as Lane City, alongside 10 towns and more than 100 villages scattered around. Besides humans, various factions like elves, beastmen, centaurs, dwarves, and other races share the realm. These different races are constantly at each other's throats, and beastmen have completely wiped out several human kingdoms, even though humans have scored some victories too. Compared to back home, this kingdom sounded super tiny, probably measuring roughly the size of a single county. Next, I grilled her about their military strength. Lane Kingdom maintains a modest force of 10 knights and 500 soldiers tasked with guarding the capital. while individual town lords command their own private troops as well. For instance, the local lord of Au town, Lord Roland, only fields 2 knights and 100 soldiers, which is just enough to keep low-level demon women from wreaking havoc in town, though honestly it is nothing too impressive. This was major news. My system let me summon at least 1 heavy knight per day, meaning in less than a month I would have over 20 elite knights as strong as Taiyi. That setup would be more than enough to steamroll Au town first, move on to other towns while recruiting soldiers along the way, and eventually take over the entire kingdom. Still, I had to play it cool and be patient. Securing actual food was the biggest issue right now. I had plenty of muscle but 0 supplies. If the system hadn't acted all glitchy, maybe it could have bilayed me out, but right now, the night summoning feature was all I had. Perhaps once I finally stake a claim on real territory, the system would step up. Elena then served dinner, consisting of some rough green veggies and hard bread. It looked pretty sketchy, but it actually tasted decent. I quickly noticed she wasn't touching her food. She claimed she wasn't feeling hungry, yet it was painfully obvious she had handed all her rations over to me. Right on cue, Old White showed up at the threshold, hauntingly carrying vegetables and grain from the village. I accepted the goods with much gratitude, but he lingered by the door, looking as if he was dying to drop a heavy topic. Urging him to speak his mind, I listened as he revealed the village had a major favor to ask, on the condition that I was down for it. Before Old White could even wrap his thought up, Elena jumped right in to cut him off, giving him a firm warning not to ship me off to any sketchy zones. Piqued by curiosity, I stepped in and told her to let the old man spill the tea. Old White laid it out, explaining how this demon woman had been terrorizing their village for a good minute now. Around 10 youngsters had slowly been snatched away over time. Though since the fiend claimed she needed manual labor, he honestly figured they were still breathing. He threw out a plea, asking if my knight could track down the demon's lair and bring the kids back safely, adding that the villagers had pooled 50 gold coins plus 200 pounds of grain as a reward. Hearing that, Elena got heated and fired back, arguing that they were playing me like a cheap mercenary. Yet Old White was at his wit's end, completely unable to just sit back and let the youth perish. Right after that, Elena dropped the unfiltered truth on me. That location was actually a fortified castle, belonging to none other than Princess Media of the Lane Kingdom. A decade ago, demon women had trapped the princess inside, and the entire kingdom had mounted rescue operations dozens of times, ultimately losing 5 elite knights in the process. There were at least 3 dangerous demon women lurking inside those walls, so she stressed that taking it on with just 1 knight was suicide. She also brought up the fact that a permanent royal bounty was active, meaning whoever successfully rescued the princess would be granted an official noble title and their own territory. Old White backed off in a hurry once he realized the sheer scale of the danger. But I stepped up and told him I'd take the gig. I just needed a 3-day window before shipping out. Elena was totally baffled as to why I gave the green light, pointing out that a noble like me had 0 reason to risk his neck. Little did she know, my internal playbook was already shifting. Rather than trying to conquer the Lane Kingdom through brute force, I could pull off the princess rescue mission, secure a legit title and land through proper channels, and subsequently use a clean excuse to take over from the inside out. Good optics are everything. I wasn't trying to roll up looking like some thug, since my true goal was carving out a real domain. I told Elena to grab a bite and quit starving herself for goodness sake, letting her know she held massive value to me. Her cheeks flushed bright crimson as her eyes went wide in shock, so I quickly jumped in to clarify I meant her overpowered witch skills. Building up my future territory totally relied on these power moves. That vague excuse left her looking low-key let down. Bedtime rolled around with some serious awkward vibes hanging in the air, given that Elena only had a single bedroom to spare. I insisted she take the actual bed while having Ty snag a few extra blankets from Old White, so we could crash right there in the living room. Right as the clock struck midnight, my system panel popped open because the daily summoning had just refreshed. I called up a fresh recruit, and sure as heck a second heavy cavalry knight materialized out of nowhere. He rocked identical gear to Ty, just with a different face. Introducing himself as Ty Air, he stood at attention. I told him to split guard duty with Ty E before promptly heading back to catch some Z's. Come the next morning, Elena spotted Ty Air and totally lost her cool. I dropped the hint that more knights were already on the way. She immediately jumped to the conclusion that I had greenlit the castle mission simply because reinforcements had been part of my master plan all along. I just let her run with that narrative, though before she could overthink the whole situation, Old White came sprinting over looking completely frantic. He spilled that soldiers originating from Au Town had officially rolled into the village, and Alan was the one who led them right there. Hearing that Au Town soldiers had arrived didn't shock me at all. some mysterious noble stepping foot in a sleepy little village, while rolling deep with an elite knight, was bound to turn some heads real quick time to go face these guys. Out in the center of the village square, a knight decked out in European-style armor sat high on a compact reddish steed, backed up by 10-foot soldiers wearing plain clothes. Alan was lingering close by, looking overly eager while whispering to the knight that a witch was hiding in the village and claiming I was some kind of dangerous heretic teaming up with her. Yet, the second that very same knight caught sight of my 2 heavy cavalry riders strutting on their colossal war horses draped in pitch-black armor, he dead-ass froze in his tracks. Standing next to my guys, he looked like a total poser, pretending to be actual royalty. He hopped down from his saddle immediately and bowed low to me, introducing himself formally as a baron who served under Lord Roland of Ayu Town. He explained that his master had heard rumors of me driving off a demon woman and genuinely wanted an audience, while Alan kept throwing a fit, insisting I deserved harsh punishment for shielding a witch, but Baron had already read the situation, thankfully. Baron had low-key already caught the vibe of the whole situation. He said if I wanted to protect a witch, dropping a casual statement. He mentioned that protecting a witch on my end Lord Roland would have no objections, would totally fly right past Lord Roland without any drama or pushback. When Alan wouldn't shut up as Alan kept running his mouth and refusing to quit, Baron ordered his soldiers to kill him. A ruthless execution command was given by Baron to his armed guards right then and there, and dump his body in the forest for wolves with instructions to toss his corpse deep into the woods as an easy snack for the wolves. Alan screamed. But nobody stopped it. Piercing shrieks echoed out from Alan. Yet absolutely zero souls stepped up to intervene. Even Elena, not even Elena, who felt some pity, knew he'd brought it on himself despite feeling a bit bad. Recognized he totally had it coming for being extra after trying to get me killed, following his shady stunt trying to get me wiped out. I told Baron my name was Zhuang Hua, my identity, as Zhuang Hua was dropped straight to Baron's face, and that I'd come to rescue Princess Midia, along with the mission briefing that saving Princess Midia was my main goal from the forest castle. He was shocked, trapped inside that creepy woodland fortress. That left him completely shook. That castle had been a forbidden zone for 10 years, given that the stronghold had stayed locked down as an absolute off-limits zone for a solid decade. Many knights and nobles from other countries had tried, countless high-ranking royals and armored knights from foreign lands had taken their shot and failed, but he respected my decision and totally bombed. Yet he low-key respected my bold hustle and promised, while giving me his word no one would interfere with my mission in the forest, that zero interference would be run against my forestry operations. He invited me to visit Lord Roland afterward. A friendly invite to swing by and catch up with Lord Roland later was tossed my way. If I made it back alive after Baron left, assuming I survived the run. Once Baron took off, I asked Old White to find a hunter. Old White got tapped by me to track down a seasoned tracker who knew the way to the castle, who had all the map secrets leading straight to the fortress. Old White hesitated, but I leaned up. Hesitation flickered across Old White's face. But I stepped up close, pushed him, and gave him a gentle nudge. His own son had been taken by the demon women too, reminding him that those savage demon ladies had snatched his own kid too. He went to find someone. Aliena insisted on coming along, prompting him to scout for backup, while Aliena low-key begged to tag along too. She said her magic wasn't strong, dropping the fact that although her spellcasting stats weren't super op, but she understood demon women's spells. She totally spoke the language of those evil sorceries and could heal people. I agreed and brought clutch healing skills to the squad. I gave her the green light. Old White brought a middle-aged hunter named Volume 50, dragging along a middle-aged bowman answering to the strange tag. Volume 50 came courtesy of Old White, who carried a bow and knew the forest well, gripping a trusty bow and knowing the wild woods like the back of his hand. I made it clear this was a scouting mission, laying down the ground rules. I stressed that this run was strictly reconnaissance. Not an attack, just find the castle. Zero all-out warfare intended. Just map out the fortress location, observe and come back. Gather intel quietly and bounce right back. Volume 50 explained that the outer forest was safe. Speaking up, Volume 50 noted that the exterior forestry belt was pretty chill hunting ground, but deeper and magic creatures appeared for hunting trips. Though monstrous magical beasts spawned the further in you ventured, they'd stumbled on the castle by accident, explaining how they had previously bumped into the stronghold completely by freak accident while chasing prey, and that's when people got captured, while running down wild game, which unfortunately led to folks getting ambushed and taken. We found the castle. It was covered in vines. The fortress finally came into view for us, wrapped completely in crawling thick vines glowing with a faint blue light from inside, while an eerie pale blue luminescence pulsed faintly through the interior windows. Strange plants surrounded it. Bizarre, otherworldly flora choked the surrounding perimeter, along with the same monkey-like creatures, accompanied by those exact same simian-looking creepers, Tai he had killed before that Tai had previously taken down earlier. I couldn't see anything about the demon women. Any trace of the actual demon women remained totally hidden from this vantage point. From here I pulled out paper and a pen, so digging into my gear. I whipped out some paper and a writing utensil I'd borrowed from Elena's house that had been pocketed from Elena's place earlier, and sketched the entire castle layout, and meticulously mapped out the whole blueprint of the fortress architecture. Elena was amazed at how accurately I drew it. Total amazement washed over Elena at my hyper-precise drafting skills. I told her it was nothing special, brushing off the compliment. I told her it was no big deal at all. I'd spent 3 years studying art with my ex. Considering 3 solid years had been spent grinding art classes with my ex back when I was in college with my ex. Drafting basic outlines was a total breeze. Layout blueprints of the surrounding terrain were finished, and I was ready to roll out just as a shady figure emerged from the gloomy castle gates. Lo and behold, it was that same creepy demon chick from yesterday. Swinging over to Tai, I asked if taking her down was doable. Tai claimed he could easily smoke the demon woman, though stopping her sneaky teleport was out of his hands. Her vanishing act was honestly low-key wild. Right at that moment, Elena stepped up, declaring she could cast a solid binding spell to totally lock down the demon woman's magical escape routes. Winning a direct brawl wasn't in her cards, but trapping her was totally doable, which was exactly what I needed. I instructed Tai to wait out Elena's spell, and then pounce, while Elena raised her trembling hands, muttering an incantation as neon green energy blasted from her palms, straight toward the target, who suddenly caught sight of us, and instantly realized what Elena was cooking up: a nasty binding curse, causing her to bolt in panic, only for Tai to cut off her getaway path completely, as glowing emerald rings tightly coiled around her body. Her signature vanishing trick was officially dead in the water. She immediately started throwing out threats, claiming some big shot named Lady Mo was lurking inside the castle and would hunt us down soon. Tai couldn't care less and knocked her out cold using a swift chop to the back of the neck. We hauled her back to the village safely. Upon snapping back to reality, she found herself pinned right in front of me with Tai's razor-sharp blade pressed against her neck. Linka was her actual name. She tried to bargain, offering to ghost the village if I set her free. That lousy deal was of zero interest to me. Instead, I grilled her about how many demon women stayed in the castle and what had actually happened to the missing princess. The second she started hesitating, Tai applied pressure with the blade until a bead of blood dropped. She spilled the beans. 5 demon women were stationed there in total, commanded by Lady Mu, and yes, the princess was still breathing. Though bizarrely enough, those demon chicks weren't even the ones holding her captive. Linka claimed ignorance regarding the real culprit and swore up and down she was keeping it 100. I threw out an offer for her to join our crew. Elena looked super sketched out about recruiting a literal demon, yet I assured her that raw talent was all that mattered. However, Linka took the proposal as total shade and straight up blew a fuse, refusing on the spot. I didn't press the issue with a quick glance at Tai. I had him escort her outside into the cold. A single blood-curdling shriek pierced the quiet, and just like that, she was gone. Elena was visibly shaken, prompting me to ask if she thought my move was ruthless. She shook her head, admitting it was the necessary call, even if she wasn't quite used to bloodshed. Yet I told her she better toughen up fast, since a whole lot more chaos was coming our way at that point. I knew only 4 demon women were left breathing, while the mystery surrounding the princess only got deeper. If those demon women weren't the ones locking her away, then who was? I'd literally have to storm the castle to find out. Striking gold at midnight, I tried my luck with another summon and totally hit the jackpot, pulling 2 knights out of the void instead of the usual one. Meet Tai San and Tai Si. That brought my heavy cavalry squad up to a solid 4, which was plenty of muscle to raid the fortress. Catching sight of the fresh recruits the next morning, Elena looked genuinely shook and even more impressed than before. She completely assumed I had some massive, influential noble family backing me with backup. Right as we were gearing up to roll out, Old White was already chilling at the edge of the village, backed by 10 local hunters locked and loaded with bows and short blades. Stepping forward, he explained they talked it over and desperately wanted to pitch in, since those captured villagers were literally their own flesh and blood. I gave them the green light, figuring extra hands never hurt anybody, instructing them to hang back in the rear lines to provide cover. Our 16-person squad marched straight into the dense forest. Meanwhile, deep within the fortress walls, Lady Muyu was pacing with a heavy scowl, stressed out over why Linka was taking forever to return deep inside the stronghold. The demon crew was completely oblivious to the storm brewing outside. Mu, their fierce ringleader, flat out laughed off the idea that anyone could possibly threaten her rule, even when one of her underlings dropped the news that Linka had bumped into a crazy strong knight down in the village. Mu just brushed it off like it was nothing. She looked down on all the local regional elites with pure contempt. Because her mind was completely locked on a much bigger obsession apparently, Princess Midia was the ultimate cheat code needed to summon a legendary magic dragon, a beast packing enough raw destructive energy to wipe out an entire kingdom. To pull off this dark ritual, the demon women had forced captive villagers to slave away building a massive shrine inside the castle. And the second construction wrapped up, Mu planned to unleash the beast to annihilate the Lane Kingdom. Before long, she picked up on our incoming footsteps. A pair of demonic female cronies were dispatched by her to handle what she figured were just more clueless trespassers coming our way. Zero stealth was my vibe. All those magical monsters guarding the stronghold entrance were completely wiped out by Tyre solo, as two winged demon ladies drifted out into the open air amidst a swarm of glowing butterflies. NGL. Watching people actually fly low-key made me envious, though my master plan was bagging 4 demon chicks, so they could haul me around like a royal palanquin. Same flex, different day, panicking hard at the mere sight of those fiends. The hunters froze until I told them to hold their ground and watch the show. Alina started chanting her binding spell right on my cue, while the knights surged forward. Swarms of hideous beasts poured out through glowing portals, summoned by the 2 demon women, while deadly vines and thickets lashed out to attack, yet my squad of knights proved way too fast and overpowered. Their heavy war horses easily clearing the thorny obstacles, Tai charged full speed ahead at one of the fiends, shredding her protective barrier in literally 2 seconds flat. And the moment she tried to make a break for it, Alina's restraint spell locked her dead in her tracks. One swift swing from Tai cleanly severed her head. Total panic set in for the second demon woman. Upon spotting Alina and realizing the shocking truth that the witch was actually teaming up with me, totally unheard of behavior. But before she could even process it, another knight smashed her defense to pieces. This survivor managed to slip away safely using an advanced invisibility spell just a split second before Alina could pin her down, apologizing profusely. Alina muttered that she didn't have the juice to pull off 2 heavy incantations simultaneously, so I assured her. She did an epic job as we pressed onward toward the fortress, having memorized the layout during yesterday's reconnaissance, only to have our advance abruptly halted at the gates by a violent purple energy shockwave, blasting us back several yards. 3 intimidating silhouettes materialized atop the ramparts, with Alina whispering to me that the leader up front was an elite greater demon entity, wielding dark magic far deadlier than the grunts. Glaring down at us with pure malice, furious over the sister-in-arms we had just executed, she called Alina an absolute fool for bowing to a human noble, prompting Alina to snap back that I was built different and that I was genuinely a good guy instead of talking things out. A blazing fireball came flying straight at me. Tai sliced it right down the middle with one clean swipe, and then he hoisted his blade high before slamming it down with brutal force onto the purple barrier. That shield spiderwebbed apart, leaving Emily totally shook. She dropped the bomb that even Lane, the kingdom's #1 knight, couldn't even scratch that defense, yet Tai Loki almost fried it in a single strike. I gave her an out, telling her to let the captive villagers walk free and hand over the princess so I'd let her keep breathing, but she ghosted my offer. Without missing a beat, I ordered the crew to smash the gate down, and all 4 of them booted it wide open as we rushed the place. Mu's eyes went huge, though she wasn't about to throw in the towel just yet, seeing as the princess was her VIP ticket to scaling up as a high-ranking demon woman. She ordered her goons to block us from getting to the princess no matter what. Though she wasn't sweating it too hard, she'd flexed control over this fortress for a decade, watching plenty of brave knights bite the dust trying to raid it. Naturally, she figured today would be no different. The second we stepped foot inside the castle hall, 10 fully armored knights were standing dead still like stone statues. Alina instantly ID'd them, realizing they were the ones who'd tried saving the princess over the past years, only for the demon women to turn them into mindless puppets. They suddenly jerked back to life and flashed their weapons. Tai told the hunters to protect my 6, while he and the other 3 knights went to deal with the threat. With heavy steel clashing against heavy steel, it was a legit war zone now. Mu materialized right inside the stronghold, giving me one last shot to walk away. I threw her exact offer right back at her: bow down or get wiped out. She let out a laugh, acting like I had just cracked the most hilarious joke of her life. She muttered that nobles had spent forever hunting witches and demon women, and now some random guy wanted her to bend the knee. How wild is that? Right after, she summoned a massive demon knight, a towering beast wielding an absurdly huge sword. Alina's jaw hit the floor as she breathed out that only elite, high-tier demon women could pull off a summon like that. Yet Tai was playing in a totally different league. He tore through those puppet knights one by one, literally knocking their helmets clean off their shoulders. Right as the demon knight rushed forward to attack, Tai-E casually swatted it right back. Giving Tai-E one fast glance, the demon knight decided this fight was a total L. It just ghosted out of there, leaving Imoyu completely triggered that her own summon dipped from battle. Now that the skirmish was over, I offered Imoyu one final chance to surrender. Refusing my offer, she tried to make a run for it, so Aliena blasted her with a binding spell. Imoyu was way too cracked, though, shattering it with a blinding flash of purple light before dissolving into a swirling cloud of butterflies. While Aliena apologized, I told her not to sweat it. Taking down Imoyu wasn't our main side quest. Securing the princess and the villagers definitely was. Scouting the castle interior, we tracked down the villagers fast. Old White's kid, Jonathan White, was among them and dropped some major tea. The demon women had forced them to construct an altar down in the basement. While slaving away down there, they had repeatedly overheard a woman's voice, crying out in agony, which he was certain belonged to the princess. We headed down to the basement, even though the knights had already checked it earlier and found nothing except stone blocks and tools. Aliena had a stroke of genius, pointing out that powerful demon sorceresses could weave dark magical barriers to put living beings into a deep, endless slumber. That altar might have been built right on top of such a barrier. I commanded the altar to be smashed. As the heavy stones were cleared away, a glowing crystal coffin was revealed underneath. Resting inside was an insanely gorgeous woman, Princess Midia, looking precisely as she had a whole decade ago, flawlessly preserved. Meanwhile, out in the open air, Imoyu wasn't even mad anymore. She was terrified. She dropped a chilling warning on her remaining minions. The princess wasn't actually a prisoner at all, she was the jailer. As long as Midia stayed asleep, everything was chill, but if she ever woke up, it would be absolute chaos that even Imoyu couldn't control. Imoyu made her executive decision right then and there. Run, abandon Alutun, and vanish as far away as humanly possible. Down in the creepy basement again, every single pair of eyes was glued to the sleeping princess. I gotta admit her looks were straight-up fire, making Aliena look basic by comparison. Suddenly, a weird vibe threw me off. The air was turning freezing cold. Real quick frost started creeping out everywhere, low-key spreading across the altar and shooting up the walls, encasing the whole room in ice. Without skipping a beat, I ordered everyone to evacuate the basement. Barely seconds later, the entire underground chamber turned into a solid block of ice. Jonathan swore nothing wild like this had ever gone down back when they were working down there. After analyzing the messy situation, Aliena explained magic was totally to blame. Raw energy was literally leaking right out of a body. When someone carries way too much uncontrolled magical juice, it manifests physically, taking the shape of ice this time around, which meant whoever was trapped inside that coffin possessed ice-type magic. And we are talking insanely powerful ice-type magic. Jonathan and Volume 50 nervously pieced the clues together, given that only demon women possess magic power. Princess Midia must have been a demon woman. Aliena stepped in to confirm that was a real possibility. Demon woman or not, I honestly couldn't care less. Saving her meant my mission was officially checked off. Provided the kingdom's cash bounty was still up for grabs, I was gonna deliver her to the king myself. Just like Aliena called it beforehand, the intense freezing eventually died down. Stepping back down, we saw the zone surrounding the crystal coffin was completely free of frost. Weirdly enough, Tai managed to pry the heavy lid open. Midia was actually breathing, somehow staying alive, after being sealed away for a decade. This crazy world just kept getting more epic. Who knows? Maybe I could even achieve total immortality here one day. Gently placing her hand right on Midia's forehead, Aliena channeled her signature healing magic. A soft green glow emanated from her body. Roughly 15 minutes later, she spoke up. The princess should be ready to snap out of it. Midia slowly fluttered her eyes open, locking her gaze on me. She demanded to know my identity. I introduced myself as Zhuang Hua, here on behalf of the Perlane Kingdom's bounty to pull off her rescue. Staring me down for a brief second, she gave a slow shake of her head. She made it clear she didn't want any help and told us to beat it. I straight up told her that choice wasn't hers to make. In my book, she was getting saved. Period. Growing furious, she snapped that this wasn't a joke. I deadpanned that I wasn't playing games. I signaled Tai-E to haul her upstairs. It didn't take long for her to figure out that pushing back would just get her dragged out by force. Stepping out of the basement, the freezing aura around her finally faded away. Her magic juice was totally tapped out. She tried to justify why she was stuck down there, dropping her tragic backstory about being born a demon woman whose volatile frost magic had accidentally frozen her mother dead during labor. A wise sage had kept her powers under wraps for years, though they kept getting stronger anyway. Eventually, she had her father construct this remote castle deep in the woods to keep herself away from society. She enjoyed a vibe of peace there for a bit, until one day a surge of her magic leaked out, and instantly froze all her maids, shattering every single one of them to pieces. Then Emma rolled up and pitched the idea that crashing in the crystal coffin would lock down her magic leaks and keep anyone else from getting iced, so she opted to take a 10-year power nap. She reiterated that she didn't need saving and insisted that if I actually cared, I would just leave her alone. I sat through the whole sob story, then just shrugged heavy vibes. Super dramatic, sure, but totally irrelevant to me. The fact remained that she needed saving. She blew a gasket demanding to know if I grasped what being a demon woman implied in the Lane Kingdom. It basically spelled walking disaster. I countered by asking what any of that had to do with me. I was here chasing real estate and a fancy title. She was so triggered she almost cracked up, gesturing toward Alina. I reminded Midia that she was a witch, and she knew what society thought of witches in this realm. Nothing but witch hunts and execution, yet here Alina was, out in the wild saving lives, while the elite nobles just preyed on everyday folk. I told Midia she had clearly been sold a total lie. Every single demon woman I had crossed paths with kept a tight grip on her powers. Whether they wrecked people or not was a choice, not some unavoidable curse, then locking my gaze with hers. I hit her with the real question: wasn't it time for her to actually live her own life for once? Loki breaking free. Didn't she even stop to think her father might be missing her like crazy? Midia completely froze up right when I casually brought up her dad. I could totally tell she was low-key missing him to pieces. They hadn't even laid eyes on each other in over a decade, yet a quick headshake was all she offered. She swore up and down that risking his safety was out of the question instead. She proposed writing a direct letter to the king so my title and land would still be secured for me on the strict condition that I left her behind. I called her out, telling her she was being totally stubborn. The whole takeaway from my speech was that magic power can actually be controlled. She blinked hard, finally catching the vibe of what I meant. But then she asked who on earth was gonna teach her no witch or demon woman would ever help her out. Not a single demon woman would lift a finger for her. Turning around, I asked Alina straight up if witch magic and demon woman magic were actually compatible. She gave me an immediate yes, provided the princess was down to learn her unique techniques. That annoying magic-leaking glitch could totally be fixed. Glancing back at Midia, I declared the problem solved. She just stared right through me, probably wondering if I had this whole master plan rigged from day one. I told her that if her old man genuinely loved her, all that petty witch and demon woman stigma wouldn't mean a thing. And it was obvious he actually cared. She had accidentally taken her mother's life at birth, using her magic. Yet despite that tragedy, her father never once laid the blame on her and kept her safe all these years. Pressing her one last time, I asked her if she'd finally come along, and she gave me a solid yes. Alina watched the whole interaction play out with her hands tightly pressed together, thinking the whole setup looked straight out of a wedding scene. She quickly shook that random thought right out of her head. I assigned Alina to school Midia on how to master her magic, and told Tyre to escort the rescued villagers back safely alongside the local hunters. Meanwhile, Volume 50 decided to stay behind, dropping to one knee. He stated that all 10 hunters had already made up their minds before stepping into the castle. They were dead set on becoming my permanent followers. I asked if Old White had pressured them into it. Volume 50 quickly said no, explaining to me that they had spent their entire lives getting crushed under the boots of arrogant nobles. And in me, they finally saw someone who totally crushed that ignorant prejudice once, and for all their whole vibe was about rolling with me to level up their destinies. Mad respect for that kind of raw honesty. Hustlers driven by personal goals always pull their weight way better than complacent folks still. I dropped a heads up that my squad deals with savage enemies way scarier than demon women, because war means bodies drop. Volume 50 swore they had already signed up for that reality the second they made up their minds. Green light given. I took them in. Muscle alone wasn't the only thing I needed. On lock management skills were crucial too. For whatever turf I was gonna conquer, down the road system summoned knights weren't gonna cut it by themselves. Later that night, Alina bolted out of Midia's room looking totally drained and sweaty. She was carrying some heavy news. Midia's magic output was secretly cracked way beyond expectations. Had we not stepped in today and left her chilling back at the castle within half a month, that wild, glitching magic would have totally overrun the whole of Ayu town. I was low-key confused at first, seeing as it had only frozen one single basement. Alina broke it down for me, explaining that Midia's juice wasn't run-of-the-mill sorcery. It was a cursed hex her mentor used to gossip about, a wicked spell, planted on infants before they even see the light of day, arming them with insane, innate magic that scales up stronger day by day. This corrupted energy could actually be weaponized to pull off a summon for a terrifying demon dragon straight from the underworld, bypassing every single standard rule on ranking systems. That explained why Moyu kept Midia around in the first place. She was the master key to unlocking a dragon, yet left to run wild unchecked. That cursed aura would aggressively bleed outward, sucking the life force straight out of anything it brushed against. That was the real reason her maids bit the dust years ago. Not just frostbite, but a life-sapping cursed plague. I caught my breath as the heavy realization hit me. Medea was way more lethal and infinitely more valuable than I initially figured. Elena quickly stepped in to calm my nerves, noting she had already schooled Medea on keeping her magic on a leash moving forward. 0 leaks would be happening. I looked at Elena and told her she was an absolute legend, promptly asking what she wanted as a reward. Anything inside my playbook was hers for the taking. She gave a firm head shake. All she ever asked for was my promise to never cast her aside. Letting her walk away would mean I'd completely lost my mind, you know. An absolute gem was what this girl truly was. Complete fools were all the nobles across this realm. Unbelievable power could be unlocked by witches and demon women, provided they were handled right. Wiping them out entirely remained the sole obsession of these idiots, though. Unlike those local lords, I rolled differently. Destiny had marked me as the guy bound to unite this whole continent. Locking eyes with Elena, I gave her my word. As long as she stuck by my side, walking away from her wasn't an option. Flustered and retreating to her chamber, Elena spent that night muttering quiet apologies to herself, overanalyzing every single word I had dropped earlier. Clueless about her inner turmoil, my focus was already locked onto the next day. Midnight hit, and the system dropped yet another night into my lap, bringing my grand total to 5 by the following morning. Heading back to the village was our first move, giving Aliena and Val's crew a chance to pack gear and say goodbyes. Before making tracks toward Alu Town, Medea hit me with a question I had totally been dreading. How could a guy rolling with so many powerhouse knights give a damn about some tiny kingdom's land and title? Assuming I hailed from some massive, high-tier empire, dropping the truth about being an otherworldly traveler wasn't an option. Fabricating a backstory on the spot was necessary. Telling her my homeland was a super intense superpower, I threw in brutal competition with 6 years of minor exams, 3 years of middle exams, another 3 years of major exams, and on top of all that madness, even more tests before inheriting anything. Getting sick of that exhausting grind was why I claimed I moved here on my own terms. Reading the entire situation completely wrong, she concluded I must be some royal prince who had survived brutal hardships before escaping into the Lane Kingdom. Getting genuinely emotional over the story, she swore to convince her dad to hook me up with a top-tier territory, leaving me low-key guilty. Having a literal princess vouching for my fake lore, though, was way too convenient to correct. Collecting Old White's bounty allowed us to finally clear out of the village. Our growing squad now featured 5 elite knights, 10 tag-along hunters, Aliena and Princess Medea herself. Meanwhile, back over in Alu Town, Lord Roland was completely freaking out. Bringing news straight to him, his scouts reported that I had walked out of the castle alive alongside the princess. With 5 elite knights and 10 loyal followers backing him up, he practically had enough muscle to raid the town. A solid plan against me was spinning in his head, until Amoyu suddenly materialized right in his personal space with a casual swipe of one hand. She batted his knight straight into the masonry before dropping a serious warning. She laid it on Roland that Medea was cursed with a fatal hex capable of wiping out everyone inside. If she ever stepped foot there, she argued the real royalty had already checked out permanently. And this girl was low-key a total fraud since nobody stays looking identical for a whole decade straight. She ghosted out of there instantly, leaving Roland completely shook. Roltind wasn't about to take any chances. Heavy iron portcullises and gates were ordered shut immediately, dragging our tired feet into Ayu Town. By twilight, following a grueling full day on the road, the massive barricades remained firmly bolted. Volume 50 was dispatched by me to holler up at the watchmen and broadcast the arrival of Princess Medea. Dead silence was the only response from the sentries above. Volume 50 cranked up his volume and yelled again, still getting ghosted, which sent him into a rage. He kept his cool under the surface, though hoping to avoid making any unnecessary drama for my sake. Stepping up to the plate, Tai offered to bust those doors wide open. That idea looked mighty tempting, and Medea could totally read it on my expression. She quickly stepped in to intercept, insisting she could handle the situation herself. After all, she was the rightful royal. Local authorities ought to recognize her face stepping closer to the stone ramparts. However, the guards finally broke their silence, delivering words she was totally unprepared for. They straight up labeled her a fake, some dark entity masquerading as the true princess. Any real royal would have visibly aged over a span of 10 years. They claimed, and since her appearance hadn't shifted an inch, she had to be a total catfish imposter. They ordered her to bounce immediately or face brutal consequences. Speechless and stunned, Medea fell silent after sleeping through an entire decade, She genuinely hadn't factored in how looking completely frozen in time would breed suspicion. Making another attempt, she urged them to fetch Lord Roland so she could verify who she really was. The sentries bluntly told her to get lost. Heartbreak was written all over Midia's face, facing cold rejection right at her own family's doorstep. She turned to me with an apologetic, humiliated look, overwhelmed by the shame of being locked out of her very own lands. With a reassuring chuckle, I told her none of this mess was her fault. The locals of Ayu Town were totally acting like total rebels. Had they been loyal at all, her credentials would have been checked right away, followed by a report straight to her dad, instead of just screaming curses at her and slamming the gates shut. Clearly, that meant they had flipped on the kingdom. Midia came over asking what our next move was. Seeing as this was the absolute only route leading to the capital, I told her to chill out, because if they were rebels, we'd just roll right over them. Right after that, I flagged down Tai E and gave him the green light to take Ayu Town down. And without asking any extra questions, he simply gave a solid yes. The town fortifications were low with a pretty weak gate, since this was only a tiny settlement after all. Kicking things off, Tai E fired an arrow straight from his saddle from a huge distance, taking out a guard on the wall instantly. Following that, he announced out loud to the town that Lord Roland had completely betrayed Lane Kingdom, and that our squad was operating under Princess Midia's authority. To deal with the traitor, any resistance would be met with zero mercy and total destruction. Roland didn't even take the threat seriously, figuring 15 people couldn't possibly conquer his turf. He headed off to take a nap and left his knight in charge. My 5 knights charged forward on horseback and let loose a rain of arrows. 5 more guards hit the dirt. While total panic swept through the defenders, none of them had seen actual combat in ages. Roland's knight attempted to sneak a peek over the battlements and nearly got his entire head blown off. A stray arrow smashed into his helmet with such force, it nearly crushed his skull. While 2 of our knights kept the wall guards pinned down tightly. I had volume 50 along with the hunter's grab. A heavy timber to bash the gate open. One single strike was all it took. The heavy doors blew wide open as Talia's crew rushed right inside, slashing through the guards stationed at the entrance. They stormed upward, toward the ramparts via the stone stairs. The guards were completely cornered, because standing up meant getting sniped by the archers outside, while staying down meant running straight into the knights rushing up the stairs. Most of them threw in the towel right away. Tai E shouted out that unconditional surrender was ordered by the princess. Drop your gear, and live or keep fighting and get wiped out. The ordinary soldiers dropped their weapons instantly, leaving only Roland's personal knight standing his ground in defiance. He stepped up and challenged Tai E to a duel, showing respect for his fierce loyalty. Tai E accepted the challenge. Honestly, it wasn't even a fair fight, because Talia's armor was way too solid. Absolute brute strength was completely on his side. Plus, his weapon technique was on a whole other level. Just one brutal impact sent the poor knight's sword flying out of his grip. Without skipping a beat, Tai E swept his leg and dropped him into the dirt. Then he shoved his blade straight through that tiny gap in the neck plate. Talk about a totally ruthless and clean finish. The remaining guards were literally shaking in their boots. Tai didn't waste time demanding where Roland was hiding. One guy completely stammered out that the Lord was holed up in his manor, and eagerly offered to show the way. Tai told volume 50 to escort me and Midia safely inside, while he went off to bag Roland himself. Wearing a smug grin, I glanced over at Midia. See, we totally made it in after all. Sure, we breached the perimeter, but Midia was super triggered given how she'd been raised with high-class manners, believing deeply that we should have verified our identity through proper diplomatic channels, instead of just smashing our way through the front door. I dropped some truth on her, saying a kingdom's gotta be ruthless with traitors, otherwise the royal family loses all their street cred and authority. She still looked totally lost and confused, keeping in mind how the Roland household had always acted super respectful toward her dad. I let her know that was just a fake front. The exact second they recognized her face and still locked us out, that was pure treason. Tai right. Then he dragged Roland right in front of me with the whole wretched family trailing behind him. Under heavy guard, I straight up called Roland out, reminding him how his very own knight invited me to dinner right after we saved the princess. Yet, when I actually rolled up with the princess in tow, he slammed the heavy wooden doors right in our faces. Totally unforgivable. Without hesitation, I ordered his entire bloodline executed and made sure his head went on public display as a serious warning. Midio totally flipped out, protesting that it was all just a big misunderstanding, arguing that the Lane Kingdom had literally never executed a noble in its history. Stepping closer, I grabbed her shoulders and stared right into her eyes, explaining clearly that showing mercy to a vicious enemy is just cruelty to yourself. Did she really want the crown overthrown one day, leaving her and her father locked up in rusted chains? Roland panicked and tried to save his skin, blubbering that some demon woman had supposedly warned him that Midia was cursed and destined to murder everyone in the settlement. I couldn't help but laugh out loud at that pathetic excuse, as if the princess hadn't just been locked away by demon women herself for a whole decade. Roland finally copped to taking marching orders from a total sellout cozying up to the enemy. Collaboration with the enemy case closed, and Tai E didn't hesitate to drop the hammer with a swift execution. Roland's head rolled clean off in one brutal motion. Completely shaken up, Midia started stressing over some serious divine retribution. After all, nobles in this realm were supposedly shielded by the gods themselves. Cutting through her panic, I bluntly told her that if any god was actually real and fair, Roland deserved an even worse fate. There was no way I was letting some dumb superstition freeze us in our tracks. Moments later, Alina escorted Midia over to the Baron's manor to get some shut-eye. Midia curiously pressed Alina, asking if I was always this reckless, disrespecting the deities and treating human life like trash. With a soft smile, Alina confessed she knew nothing about heavenly gods, pointing out that I was the only soul in this messed-up world who actually accepted witches and demon women. Far as she was concerned, I was her personal god. Tai E stepped up to drop the loot report. 5,000 gold coins, a bunch of shiny jewels, and a massive 30,000 pounds of grain straight out of Roland's estate. Keeping the gold locked down, I had the jewels sold off, while the bulk of the grain went directly to the destitute. Only the poor saw a single kernel, though not a single morsel went to the rich snobs. Right on cue, my system panel flashed to life, flashing a notification that I'd successfully locked down Au town and prompting me to claim it as my official turf. Surveying the grim surroundings, I flat-out refused. The spot was trash, zero natural defenses, barren resources, and a totally dead population. Making this dump my main base was a total waste of time, so the system logged it, simply as a conquered yet unclaimed sector. Even so, it dropped a sick reward, an infinite space, a cheat code storage perk capable of holding an endless amount of non-living items, which was ridiculously clutch. Suddenly, the system tried booting up some feature called a mission system, only to short-circuit amid a barrage of static crackles, and crash completely, prompting a low-key groan from me. Not again, the damn system just totally glitched out, meaning my infinite space got instantly downgraded to a measly 100 cubic meters of storage. That massive downgrade from limitless to 100 was straight-up painful. Pressing the system for answers proved entirely useless, yielding the usual stubborn silence. Still, having 100 cubic meters was way better than walking away empty-handed. Having stressed for ages over how to haul all that heavy gold and massive piles of grain, I simply flicked my hand across the warehouse floor and watched everything instantly vanish into the void. With a casual gesture, I immediately pulled out 10,000 pounds of grain and instructed Tai E to set up a massive giveaway first thing tomorrow, making sure everyone knew whose generosity they were getting. Anonymous charity was totally not my vibe. I needed these folks locked in on my name. That night, I hit the summon button again and totally scored, pulling a triple draw all at once. That brought my total to 8 heavy cavalry. At this rate, I'd have a low-key unstoppable squad in no time, fully capable of wiping out entire kingdoms if I felt like it. Yet, I checked myself, reminding my brain I was here to build, not destroy. The following morning, Midia jolted awake to crowds chanting my name outside, stepped right out, and caught me dishing out grain to the poor locals of Au town. While the whole vibe of my mission eluded her, gazing at those genuinely grateful faces left her utterly speechless. She told me I was light years ahead of clowns like Roland, crushing it not just in raw power, but in pure heart. I replied that I was simply backing up the princess in looking after her people. We bounced out of Au town in style. I'd upgraded to Roland's flex carriage, decked out gorgeously and hitched to powerful beasts, which beat riding bareback on Talia's warhorse any day. I asked Midia if she'd be down to share the ride, so she scooted over and I hopped right in, flanked by 8 armored knights plus volume 50 and 10 followers trailing behind us, making us look like certified royalty. It was a 2-day trek to Dana City, the hub governing 3 southwestern towns including Au, followed by another 2 days heading straight to the capital. Midia broke the silence on the road, looking super nervous, and pleaded with me to please let her handle things diplomatically in case Dana City threw any shade or confusion regarding who she was, begging me not to storm the gates this time. I let out a clear laugh, fully realizing she was stressed I'd nuke another noble bloodline. I gave her the green light to take the lead, though I dropped a warning that if anyone disrespected her, all bets were off. She seemed genuinely touched. She still had it in her head that I was some foreign prince, meaning the way I treated her with total respect despite my supposed high-tier status really hit her right in the feels. Even so, she couldn't shake her anxiety over my savage streak, secretly terrified the gods would strike me down for executing nobles. Upon running into a dense forest blocking the trail, our convoy had to pull over. Tai, you jogged ahead to scope out any potential threats. Tai, you jogged ahead to scope out any potential threats. While we waited, I told everyone to kick back, relax, and whip up some dinner. Meanwhile, a low-key sketchy situation was unfolding right under my nose without me realizing. Elena was low-key side-eyeing Midia and me hanging out together, feeling super salty since she had rolled up with me first. Now the Princess Loki seemed to be stealing all my attention. Out of nowhere, a shady voice slipped right into Elena's head. Emma, the whispers claimed I was totally using mind tricks to manipulate her. That toxic voice kept feeding her massive FOMO and jealousy, pushing Elena to believe Midia had robbed her of everything she deserved, and urging her to cancel the princess for good. Luckily, Elena's mental game was way too strong. She straight up told that inner voice she would never backstab me, completely blocking it out while Emu watched, Loki lurking from a creepy tree branch. Totally pissed off that her little psychological trap had totally backfired. She had been gunning for Aliena to flip on Medea so she could finally snatch back her keys to summon the demon beast. Yet Aliena's ride-or-die loyalty to me remained totally unshakable. Glaring at us from the eerie shadows, IMO muttered under her breath that this forest was about to become our graveyard. Even then, she still refused to drop her obsession with summoning that dragon. Just then, Tai reported back that the woods were totally safe, so we paused to grab a bite before pushing forward. I totally used that downtime to pick Midia's brain about Lane Kingdom and the rest of the map. She broke it down. Lane Kingdom packed 4 major cities and 10 cozy towns, giving off big vibes while actually being pretty tiny. Right up north sat the massive Hill Kingdom, easily towering over them as 10 times larger. Out west, sketchy beastmen tribes kept trying to crash the borders, and only a powerhouse joint military alliance spearheaded by the Hill Kingdom managed to keep them checked. Lane Kingdom mostly just functioned as a supply hub for resources and gear rather than sending frontline grunts. Next up, she dropped some lore on the Holy Temple Knights, an elite squad boasting over 10,000 troops commanded directly by 10 legendary Round Table Knights. History showed they had once completely wiped out an entire faction of high-ranking demon women who possessed the terrifying power to summon dragons, making them the absolute heavyweight force across the entire continent. Here is where things got super sketchy. The Holy Temple had slapped a permanent hit list out targeting every single demon woman alive, which totally explained why Lane Kingdom had such intense beef with them. If Midia's own dad hadn't gone out of his way to mask her true identity back then, she totally would have been wiped out, as kid witches were totally included in that brutal decree too, which honestly made Aliena's expression drop and go super dark. I immediately told both of them to chill out and not stress seeing, as the Holy Temple was miles and miles away. And as long as I was holding it down right here, no one was gonna dare use their identities against them. I literally couldn't care less what the temple ordered. Demon women and witches were living people with feelings, and blanket execution orders were just straight up wrong. Midia totally freaked out and slapped her hand over my mouth, whispering frantically for me not to speak such reckless thoughts aloud. I just shrugged it off, Loki knowing that someday I'd be so overpowered that the temple would be forced to bend the knee if I ever commanded it. We pushed deep into the thick forest, but daylight faded before we could make it all the way through, leaving us no choice but to set up camp right there. Suddenly, one of my loyal guys ran up reporting that a little girl had randomly appeared outside our perimeter, stepping out to check. I saw she was barely 7 or 8 years old, rocking a crimson hood and a red cloak while clutching a small wicker basket. She looked like she had literally walked right out of a storybook, straight out of Little Red Riding Hood, with wide eyes. She claimed she got lost while foraging for wild veggies and was terrified that her poor grandmother would be worried sick. The parallel to the classic fairy tale was way too sus to ignore. Keeping my guard up, I held back my response and turned to ask Tai if they had scouted any human settlements nearby during patrol. He confirmed there was a small village in the vicinity, though it sat way off our designated route. Without wasting time, I had Alina scan the kid for any hidden magic signature. She came back empty, confirming the girl was completely normal and human. Figuring it was safe, I told Tai to take 2 guys and escort her back home, yet hours dragged by and Tai still hadn't returned. 2 hours flew past, and then midnight struck, still absolute silence, which felt majorly weird. Even so, Tai was definitely strong enough to handle himself, so random low-level threats couldn't lay a finger on him. Pushing the bad vibe aside, I decided not to panic just yet when midnight hit, and it was time to summon my daily knight. This time around, something completely wild went down. Instead of spawning a standard heavy cavalry knight, the system suddenly announced the arrival of a holy light knight amidst a brilliant burst of golden illumination. There she stepped forward, a fierce female warrior, Knight Alice. Standing at attention to report to my master Alice, possessed a presence vastly different from all my previous summons, shining with radiant golden hair, striking blue eyes, and gleaming gold armor. She was the literal embodiment of a holy warrior. Without missing a beat, I locked her in as my personal bodyguard. Someone flexing that hard definitely needed to stay glued to my side. Alice started proving her absolute worth. Right off the bat, she had this crazy knack for sensing magic, which was a total flex, because none of my other knights could do it. An active battle happening close by was detected by her radar, and she warned me that if we didn't step in right then, Tai was totally gonna get cornered and taken out there. She wasn't about to roll solo, though, since I'd strictly ordered her to guard me. She took that directive dead seriously. She flat out refused to budge from my side, even to go save someone else's skin. So I told her to drag me along with her instead, leaving Tai Air and the rest behind to keep Midia and Alina safe with just one arm. Alice scooped me right up onto her horse and bolted into the pitch blackness at insane speeds, never pumping the brakes even without a shred of light. The burning village finally came into view for us. Huddled together and weeping were over 100 terrified villagers. Right in the middle of them was Little Red Riding Hood. An old woman stepped up and explained that after Tai escorted the girl home, a pair of demon women ambushed them, torching the settlement and hunting everyone down for good. Tai put up a fierce fight against them, but ended up trapped inside a cage woven from massive vines while surrounded by raging flames. My two loyal followers who tagged along with him were already goners, telling the villagers to sit tight. I motioned for Alice to move forward. We finally reached Taiya's exact location, where he was hacking away endlessly at the cage of vines. He could slice clean through it. But the thing kept instantly regenerating, while blistering waves of fire kept slamming into him from outside. Standing close by were the two demon women, continuously chanting spells to keep the trap locked down, drawing her glowing holy sword. Alice boldly announced her presence. One of the demon women let out a mocking laugh, dismissing her as nothing more than a walking tin can with a single swing of her blade by Alice. A powerful slash of energy resembling a sword beam sliced straight through both the fire and the vines, making the entire trap vanish in a split-second. Absolute panic hit the demon women the moment they recognized it. Only elite Holy Temple Knights possessed the power to nullify magic like that. As they spun around to flee, Tai burst free from the wreckage, snatched up his bow, and shot one of them right through the shoulder. Her escape magic failed to activate as well because Alice's overwhelming holy power had totally blocked it, vanishing right out of thin air from her spot. Alice materialized instantly right next to the other demon. Just like that, a single devastating strike ended it all. Staring daggers at me through her final breath, the injured foe glared fiercely. "Emo," she muttered, "you totally slept on my capabilities." With her dying words, she warned that I'd also underestimated Emo. Dropping a cryptic hint, she claimed something crazy was going down back at my camp. Honestly, I wasn't stressing. Guarding Midia and Alina were 7 elite heavyweight knights. There was no way even Emo could breach that defense. I waved my hand, having Tai put her out of her misery. To satisfy their bloodlust, these demon women had torched an innocent village and slaughtered my guys just to get to me. Zero mercy was going to be shown by me toward anyone who treated human lives like absolute trash. Turning to Alice, I asked if extinguishing the raging village fires was doable. Dropping to one knee, she offered a quick apology. Her broken powers only dispelled magical barriers, leaving real flames untouched. A total bummer, yet her abilities remained ridiculously clutch. While Tai sustained minor scrapes that Alina patched right up, we headed over shortly after to check on the locals. Bowing low, every single survivor expressed their gratitude to me, though they tearfully noted their home was completely leveled, and they had zilch to offer in return. Stepping forward, I introduced myself as Zhuang Hua, explaining I had just rescued Princess Midia and was about to step up as an official lord of Lane Kingdom. Seeing as their village was wiped out, I put it out there. Would they be down to roll with me? With profound relief, the villagers eagerly accepted my proposal. Only about 100 of them remained, featuring a meager 30 able-bodied men. Taking 10 of them along, I departed, leaving behind a massive stash of 10,000 pounds of grain right at the entrance to easily sustain them for half a year. Once my territory was officially locked down, I promised I'd return to relocate everyone properly. Suddenly, Alice sounded the alarm, gasping that she sensed a massive surge of dark magical energy and demonic entities surging straight from the direction of our camp. While I was away, Emo had actually launched a surprise raid. Wrapping things up swiftly with the villagers, I had Alice teleport me back at breakneck speed. Back at the camp, Emo had initiated a full-scale blitz, summoning endless waves of hideous monsters while making another desperate play to mess with Alina's head. Whispering sweet poison, She urged Alina to betray Midia so she could keep me all to herself, only for Alina to shut her down ice cold. What I truly value is genuine companionship, not control, Alina fired back, choosing to stand firmly by my side of her own free will. Stepping up to have Midia's back, Alina quickly cast a protective shield while throwing powerful healing magic over the tired knights, and followers' every single wound and trace of fatigue vanished in a split second. Charging forward, Tyre spearheaded the fierce counterattack and absolutely crushed the summoned beasts out of nowhere. Midia dropped a major plot twist by somehow tracking Imoyu's hidden location, thanks to the residual aura of the very spell Imoyu used to lock her away. She pointed straight toward the coward's hiding spot, and Tyre immediately hurled a blazing torch to expose her. Alina tried to lock her down with a heavy binding spell, but Imoyu ghosted out of there before it could land Alice, and I rolled up right as the dust settled from the brawl. Thankfully, everybody was safe, and sound they started apologizing profusely for letting Imoyu slip away. I waved it off, and told them to chill out. It was literally just one runaway demon woman. I told everyone to get some solid sleep for tomorrow's big march catching sight of Alice. Midia immediately froze up in pure tension. That gleaming golden armor and the intimidating title of Holy Light Knight brought back dark flashbacks of the Holy Temple which hunted down demon women like her. For sport, I quickly reassured her that Alice rolled with me and meant no harm. Alice gave a brief, reassuring nod to back me up, though she kept her lips sealed. Leaving Midia shook a hardcore temple knight, actually serving alongside a demon princess without throwing hands was wild to her. Lying back on her makeshift bed, she wondered what kind of insane country I came from to command such crazy loyalty from completely opposite factions. When the next morning rolled around, Alina patched up Tai E and the rest of the injured crew. Our squad's headcount had now bumped up to 32 elite knights, 20 loyal followers, Alina, Midia, and yours truly. Little did I know, though, word about the chaos down in Ayu Town had already leaked all the way to Dana City. The local lord, Count Basin, boasted 5 heavy knights and an army of 200 soldiers, making him leagues stronger than Roland. His advisors frantically warned him that I was bad news, and that even Imoyu had taken LS fighting against me. They were sweating bullets about ending up like Roland's fallen house. Basin wasn't fazed in the slightest, though bragging that Dana City wasn't some loser wasteland, and he sure wasn't a total pushover like Roland. He fully intended to roll out the red carpet for Midia since he wasn't dumb enough to lock a princess out of his gates. But as for me, he was cooking up some nasty plans. Some church deacon randomly rolled into the city for a quick visit. Basin's master plan was to have this high-ranking religious figure deal with me and check my ego, so I low-key knew trouble was brewing at Dana City. Yet to my surprise, the massive gate stood wide open upon our arrival. Count Basin himself was already pacing outside to welcome us in, while giving Midia a warm greeting and checking out my entire squad, with side-eyes consisting of 8 hardened knights and 20 loyal followers plus Alice, standing out big time in her gleaming golden armor. Spotting the sacred symbols etched onto her gear sent him into a total freakout as he got visibly nervous. Out of nowhere, a trio of men stepping out in church robes appeared, led by a church deacon bearing the name Spur, who politely welcomed Midia to the scene. Everything felt chill and friendly at first glance, until Spur suddenly pivoted toward me with an icy stare, hitting me with a bunch of wild accusations like slaughtering Baron Roland's entire family, in cold blood, breaking sacred divine laws that strictly banned killing nobles and harboring a witch, while pointing his finger straight at Alina, causing her to tremble in fear, holding massive political clout across the kingdom. A church deacon was no joke, forcing even high-level nobles to show respect. Midia tried, stepping up to bat for me, yet Spur kept cutting her off mid-sentence every single time, while demanding to know if she was out here protecting a heretic. And when she attempted to explain that Alina was different from the rest, he shut her down instantly and formally declared me guilty as charged. I burst out laughing out loud right then, and their Basin deadass thought I had totally lost my mind from pure terror, pulling Midia close to his side in a protective stance, while lecturing her that she shouldn't be hanging around a dead man. Walking, Midia was fuming mad, but a quick glance from me made her bite her tongue and stay quiet. Spur glared and demanded why I was cracking up, so I told him straight up that it was because he was acting like a total clown. His priests lost their minds, completely triggered that I dared disrespect a deacon I didn't give a single care in the world, asking him instead who gave some low-level preacher the audacity to speak on behalf of God, since he was an absolute nobody, before I flipped the script entirely on him, accusing him of being Roland's partner in crime all along, considering Roland had straight up slandered the princess and locked her out, which was textbook treason. And now here was Spur running defense for Roland, while using the church as a shield to frame me, which technically made him a traitor too, plotting to overthrow the Lane Kingdom while hiding behind religion as a cover story Spur started stammering, nervously clutching at straws, that harboring a witch was more than enough proof to nail me. Without skipping a beat, I fired back, asking what witches had ever done to the guy. Had some witch stolen his lunch or taken out his mother? Clearly, he was just making up crimes, because the real offense here was cooking up bogus charges to flip the whole kingdom upside down. I wasn't about to stick around for any more debate. Right then and there, I commanded Tai to cuff Spur and his two priest buddies. After that, every last accomplice left in the city needed to be hunted down. Anyone caught being a traitor was getting executed. Midia's complexion drained completely. She knew I was back on my absolute nonsense, branding everybody as low-key rebels and taking them down, which was even wilder since Spur was an actual church official. Wiping him out meant making enemies out of the entire church establishment. Even so, I didn't give a soul the chance to push back. Tai locked down all three churchmen in one swift motion. Tyre then strode right up to Basin, demanding that he name any other conspirators hiding in the shadows. Basin's expression twisted as he argued that they were holy men, meaning I couldn't just casually murder them. I shut that down by reminding him they were traitors. Staring him down, I threw a direct question his way. Was he out here low-key running defense for traitors too? Did he also genuinely believe Roland was an innocent angel? Or was he convinced that I was actually some kind of heretic? Left backed into a corner, he suddenly found himself entirely out of good comebacks. Freaking out completely, Basin started desperately backpedaling. He couldn't seriously call me a heretic, not when I literally just saved the princess, so I twisted his words effortlessly. I pointed out that since Basin himself couldn't see eye-to-eye with Spur, it totally proved Spur was lying and cooking up treason all along. Before anyone else could muster up another argument, I signaled Tai to take Spur out right there on the spot. One clean swing and his head was gone, occurring right beside the city gates. Basin turned ghost white, while the other two priests completely lost control of their bladders. Begging frantically for their lives, they immediately offered to guide us straight to the church's main headquarters in the city. I dispatched Tyre along with a crew of knights and followers to raid the place. Turning my attention back, I interrogated the remaining priest, demanding to know who actually put Spur up to confronting me like that. The terrified priest confessed that Basin's steward had stopped by earlier that morning to brief the church on my entire squad, specifically noting that I had a witch traveling with me. Exploding with rage, Basin vehemently denied every single detail, though I calmly pointed out that the priest had only accused his steward, not him personally. So why was he getting so overwhelmingly defensive? Leaning toward Midia, I laid the brutal truth out for her. Anybody could be slapped with a heresy charge by the church on pure hearsay, totally lacking evidence, while I was built enough to weather that storm today. Yet, just how many everyday folks got wiped out the exact same way this absurd authority was engineered purely to keep the kingdom under their thumb? That was high treason. Making Midia go totally silent, I could catch her slowly coming around to my side. Basin was ordered by me to hand over his steward. Immediately, he pushed back. But I backed him into a tight corner. Giving a refusal meant he had plotted the whole thing himself. That would officially brand him the traitor stepping up. Midia had my back and straight up demanded that Basin surrender the guy. Outnumbered and outplayed, he was totally out of options, with only 2 of his knights facing my 6 right by the gate he sent for his steward. But his very own knight rushed back with news that the man tried running for it and got taken down on the spot. How convenient that the key evidence literally died with him letting it slide. I figured the guy was a goner either way. An invitation to a feast inside was tossed our way by Basin, forcing an awkward smile. I kept Midia right beside my squad, instead of mingling with his crew. He low-key hated the power move, though he couldn't drop a single complaint right. Then bursting back from the church headquarters came Tyre, wearing a dead serious look as he announced. I needed to lay eyes on something with my own 2 eyes, dragging both Midia and Basin along. I followed him in. What we stumbled upon left everyone in that holy building dead, silent, gory remains of little girls were exposed to us by Tyre. The church members had been hacking them to pieces under the sick excuse of forging magical weapons to fight the demon women trapped down in the basement. A dozen kids were still breathing down there, caged up in cells, every single one of them brutally mutilated. Limbs lopped off, hands and feet missing entirely. One poor kid even had her eyes gouged right out. Even Basin lost his lunch at the horrifying sight. Midia stood frozen, staring in absolute terror. The very same church preaching holy justice and righteousness had been pulling this sick stuff behind closed doors. Gazing down at the victims, she choked out a whisper about how utterly pitiful they were. My blood was boiling with rage. Tyre received my direct command to tear Dana City apart block by block. Not a single scumbag from that church was allowed to slip away. Every last one of them was getting wiped out this time. No one from the media tried to stop me, and even Basin kept his mouth totally shut. Questions were thrown by the media regarding the fate of the mutilated girls. Meeting their gaze, I noticed an utter emptiness in their eyes. They were shattered beyond repair. Beckoning Elena over, I checked if she had the capability to heal them. Her answer was positive, though she noted it would require some time. The severity of their bodily damage made it a lengthy process. As Elena began weaving her healing magic, Basin and his crew instinctively retreated. Nervously whispering among themselves, they muttered, "A witch." Witches were strictly outlawed throughout this kingdom, much like demon women. Basin confessed that his fear wasn't directed at Elena personally, but rather at the holy temple's strict decree mandating that all witches be burned. Gesturing toward Alice, he argued she clearly hailed from the temple and ought to sympathize with his situation. Fixing a freezing stare upon him, Alice posed two straightforward questions. Was Elena causing harm or saving lives? Saving. Was her nature good or evil? Good. Averted eyes from Alice signaled that the verdict was reached. Wiping beads of sweat from his brow, Basin excused himself while I headed down into the basement alongside Tyre. An overwhelming stash of treasure filled the church's underground vaults, featuring chests of gold coins and no less than 50,000 pounds of grain. This minor outpost outranked the entire estate of Baron Roland in wealth. At least 10,000 gold coins were tallied by Tyre. With a simple flick of my wrist, I vacuumed everything into my inventory storage. Upon returning upstairs, some of the young women were already regenerating their missing hands and feet, and one had even recovered her sight. Overwhelmed with awe and appreciation toward Elena, they remained slightly cautious of me, though I assured them their captivity was over. Once fully recovered, arrangements would be made to send them home. Expressing anxiety that the church might hunt them down again, I reassured them that those monsters were finished hurting anyone for good. A briefing from Tyre confirmed that every single church operative in Dana City had been rounded up, prompting me to order the gates flung wide open so the prisoners could be hauled out into the public square. It was vital for the local townsfolk to witness the truth with their own eyes. Stepping up before the gathered crowd, I laid out all the facts, revealing my identity alongside the horrific atrocities the church inflicted on those girls. How they were abducted, dismembered, and tortured by hypocrites claiming to act in God's name. Then I asked them just think about all those other kids who vanished under identical, shady circumstances. Would any parent honestly want their precious sons and daughters meeting such a grim fate? Absolute silence gripped the gathered masses, initially though I could totally spot a low-key fury burning deep within their eyes. Without missing a beat, I laid down the law. Those prisoners were getting executed right then, and there not a single soul dared to protest as Tai-E and my armored knights kicked off a fierce chant. Kill, 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 instantly joining in. The surging crowd let out war cries that rattled the humid night air with a swift downward wave of my hand. Every single corrupt church member lost their head. Far from being horrified by the bloodbath, the locals looked totally relieved after all. Those holy frauds had never shown any mercy to commoners either. Once Elena finished working her magic to heal all the traumatized girls, I had my loyal escort safely walk them homeward. Spread like wildfire through Dana City regarding the justice I had just served alongside the truth about the kind witch who saved those kids. People were finally waking up to the fact that witches might not be those terrifying monsters they'd been brainwashed to fear. Only Bazin was sweating bullets over this development, fully aware that butchering church personnel was bound to trigger heavy blowback. His slick advisor immediately pitched a clever play. They would dispatch a full report to both the High Temple and the Royal King, pinning all the bloodshed entirely on me, and the rogue princess that way. Bazin's own hands would stay completely clean. They would also drop hints about the witch operating within my faction, betting the church would go feral for that juicy piece of intel, yet they deliberately left Alice out of the paperwork. Since Bazin wanted zero smoke with anyone tied directly to the sacred temple, no other unexpected company came looking for a fight that night, which honestly felt like a low-key disappointment, considering that church outpost had been absolutely loaded with treasure. I could only imagine what kind of generational wealth those noble families were hoarding. Every single coin and grain would have been massive for fueling the foundation of my upcoming territory. But sadly, not a soul handed me a valid excuse to raid their manors as the clock struck midnight. I summoned 2 additional heavy-duty knights into existence, bringing my total combat squad up to 11. These elite fighters formed the absolute bedrock of everything I intended to build here. Stubbornly refusing to stop pulling guard duty right outside my chamber door, Alice stood her ground until I finally wore her down enough to accept a compromise resting on a soft mattress placed just a few feet away, so she could bounce up instantly if any sudden threat popped off. Having such a fiercely loyal and gorgeous personal bodyguard made crashing in this bazaar unfamiliar realm feel surprisingly cozy and secure the following morning. Bazin personally showed up at the gates to wave us off while giving my hand a firm shake and hyping up plans for us to grab some drinks together next time we crossed paths. I just flashed a chill grin and played along, low-key keeping my cool. Deep down inside, though, my gut was screaming that this dude was totally shady. No need to rush things, though. Sooner or later, I was definitely gonna settle the score with him. Stretching out beneath a wide, open sky, the flat grassland road led straight from Dana City toward the capital. A vast, breezy expanse surrounded us on all sides. To keep everyone from having to trek the whole way on foot, I grabbed a bunch of horse-drawn carts right back in town. That way, folks could just kick back and ride instead of walking. Cruising along at a fast clip, we smashed a 2-day journey into a single afternoon. As the majestic towers of the royal city finally peeked over the distant horizon, Elena let out a loud gasp, totally awestruck by its gorgeous view. Even I had to hand it to them, since the striking foreign architecture was seriously impressive up close. Tears welled up in Midia's eyes, given that she hadn't laid eyes on her beloved hometown in a whole decade. Right there at the grand gates, a seasoned elderly official named Elate was standing by, waiting for our arrival. Serving as the Minister of Internal Affairs, he had been personally sent by the king himself. Without missing a beat, Midia recognized him immediately and warmly called out to him as Uncle Elate. 10 long years had clearly taken a toll, leaving him looking noticeably aged. With a sharp, knowing smirk, he gave my armed knights and loyal followers a quick once-over before waving us inside. Stepping into the palace grounds, restrictions meant I could only bring 2 knights and a single attendant along. To fill those spots, I ended up picking Alice, Tai E, and Elena. King Lance Lane bolted over to Midia the exact second we walked through the doors. Father and daughter were finally reunited after being separated for a full decade. After spending a long time catching up, he finally turned his attention toward me. He acknowledged right away that I had traveled all the way from the mysterious east, trekking across treacherous mountain ranges and vast, endless oceans. Giving credit where credit was due, he noted my huge achievement, stating that the monster bounty legally entitled me to the rank of Count, along with an official title and a territory. Though he suddenly paused and hesitated. My whole body tensed up instantly. Seriously, not another annoying cliffhanger. He went on to explain that over the past 10 years, the church had aggressively seized total control over most of the kingdom's power. Even the head commander of the royal military pledged his ultimate loyalty to the church instead of backing the actual crown. Namely Knight Owen, leaving the poor king with authority over nothing more than his personal palace guard. Without getting the green light from the church, his royal decrees couldn't even stretch past the stone walls of the capital. Describing himself as a total puppet king, he admitted that he could only carve out a tiny patch of land for me, which was still under his direct personal control and barely bigger than a standard farming village. It was a pathetic reward, falling way short of what a real count deserved. Looking totally low-key and flustered, Midia tried to calm me down by warning me that picking a fight with the church was way too sketchy, yet I locked eyes dead with the king and hit him with a single question. Was he seriously down to break free from the church's grip? He stared right back at me looking totally lost, but I laid it out plain and simple. The church was moving no different than total scumbag traitors who had straight-up jacked his crown. If he'd just let me do my thing, I would restore order on his behalf and hand his kingdom right back to him. Taking out church members was old news to me, so this was literally nothing. My territory was on the line, and backing down was not a vibe. Pressing King Lance hard, I reminded him he was an actual king and not some random puppet. So did he really want to live under the church's thumb forever? He hesitated for a second, stressed out about the holy temple lurking behind the church. I told him the church had completely crossed the line by sticking their noses into politics right then. Midia spilled everything we discovered in Dana City, detailing the mutilated girls and the brutal torture. His expression darkened instantly, though he was still super nervous because the church's brutal enforcer, Knight Commander Owen, commanded 15 elite knights along with 500 soldiers, meaning a direct head-on clash could totally backfire. I told him straight up that we needed to strike fast before they could even process what was happening, hitting them out of nowhere like lightning. I cut a deal with him. Grant me full authority to deal with the church once and for all, and if I pulled it off, he'd let me pick my own custom territory. If I totally flopped, he could pin the whole mess on me. Pulling his advisor Elide aside for a quick low-key chat, he marched back with a fierce, burning look in his eyes. He agreed to everything, even tossing me the command of his personal palace guard. We were fully locked in together now, which I honestly loved. Had he turned out to be a total coward, I would have just taken over the entire kingdom by force. But since he actually had some spine, waiting until morning was completely off the table. Every single hour gave the church extra time to prep, so I secured their coordinates and rolled out immediately. Meanwhile, over at the church headquarters, while I didn't know the full picture yet, here is what was actually going down. The bishop had rounded up all his deacons to figure out how to take care of me. Their master plan was dead simple. Send Knight Commander Owen to ambush and arrest me right at the palace, assuming I only had 2 knights with me. Then burn me and Aliena alive in a public execution. Then Emma, you literally just materialized dead in their meeting room out of nowhere. A demon woman just casually strolled into a room, packed with high-ranking church leaders. And surprisingly, nobody even flinched. It was low-key obvious they were in cahoots the whole time. An attempt was made by the bishop to brush her off. But she immediately dropped a massive bombshell. A pact with the king had already been struck by me, and right now. My elite knights and palace guards were aggressively marching straight toward the church. That sudden flex totally grabbed their attention. Mo, you proposed a trade using her specialized teleportation magic. Owen, along with his massive army, would be warped directly inside the church, completely sidestepping my surprise raid. And in return, Princess Media was demanded as payment without a single moment of hesitation. The bishop agreed, trading away a royal princess as if she were a piece of trash furniture. A giant glowing portal was whipped open by Mu, allowing Owen to step through, flanked by 10 elite knights and 300 soldiers. Just like that, she vanished, leaving a totally bewildered Owen wondering why a random demon was hanging out there. And what weird deal. The bishop kept rambling about, brushing off the confusion entirely. The bishop shoved Bazin's report into his face, detailing how I murdered church members and was actively harboring a dangerous witch, while claiming the king himself had been corrupted by a vile heretic. It didn't take much to convince Owen at all, since he was a total zealot. Heretics needed to be utterly wiped out. He proclaimed while swearing on his honor that nobody would lay a finger on the bishop today. So while I was speed-running toward the church, foolishly believing I had the element of surprise locked down, an entire army was already waiting to ambush me. Right inside, as we closed in on the sacred building, Alice suddenly sounded the alarm, picking up heavy demonic signature vibes which were radiating straight from the heart of the sanctuary. It matched the exact same energy signature Mu gave off back in the forest. So while the church publicly preached about eradicating demonkind, they were secretly locking business deals with one behind closed doors. Suddenly everything made total sense. The church bishop was actually that wise guy who suppressed Media's cursed magic all those years ago. Her heavy curse was no secret to them at all, and then IMOU conveniently showed up on the scene just to seal Media away inside the castle walls. The Holy Church and IMO had been working as partners from day one. I screamed at everyone to go full send and rush in, only to find the church locked down and heavily fortified upon our arrival with soldiers lying in wait for us. Emma, you totally sold us out and leaked our position. Even so, it didn't even matter, because I rolled up with 10 heavy-duty knights along with 20 loyal followers plus the king's elite squad of 5 palace knights, and a solid 200 troops giving the green light to Tai. I ordered him to strike, as he spearheaded the assault out in the open with 0 walls to take cover behind. It became a brutal open-field brawl when Owen's forces met us head-on, though they clashed fiercely. My summoned knights simply hit way harder. Their massive, heavy blades bashed deep dents into enemy armor with every single swing, even when standard cuts wouldn't easily slice through. My systems. Summoned fighters instantly knew the exact playbook for dealing with armored opponents, leveraging sheer blunt force. They cracked Owen's elite vanguard wide open, realizing they were completely getting rolled. Owen strongly advised the bishop to make a run for it. Refusing to budge, the bishop instead decided to pull a sick move, dragging out a cursed staff hidden right beneath his throne. It was a genuinely disturbing sight, topped with a shrunken human head, while weeping eyes completely covered the shaft. Thick waves of oppressive dark magic pulsed right off it, crafted grotesquely from the actual corpses of those abducted girls. Utterly disgusted, Owen demanded that the bishop smash the abomination to pieces. Instead of complying, the bishop just laughed maniacally and coldly leveled the creepy staff straight at Owen's. Swirls of pitch-black energy swallowed him whole in a flash. Owen went completely dead silent on the spot as his eyes flared a terrifying, bloodshot red, and he was reduced to a mindless, blank-staring puppet, completely at the mercy of the bishop's control, sweeping through the last of the foot soldiers. Tai's squad kicked down the doors and burst into the main hall. They immediately locked eyes with the horrific scene unfolding inside without hesitating. Tai lunged aggressively at the brainwashed Owen, yet something was terribly wrong, because Owen's physical strength had easily doubled, if not tripled, sending Tai flying backward with a single devastating blow. Beaming with pure sadistic joy, the bishop ordered the corrupted knight to slaughter everyone in sight. Even when Tyre and 3 other battle-hardened knights teamed up to jump him, Owen casually brushed off their coordinated onslaught like it was nothing, unfazed by pain or injuries. He functioned purely as the bishop's executioner. Before long, one of my frontline knights crashed hard to the stone floor while the bishop cackled wildly, rambling out loud about his grand scheme to forge an army of puppets and dominate every single faction until the church stood unchallenged as the absolute ruler of Lane Kingdom. Refusing to back down, all my remaining knights rushed forward together, managing to land some solid hits and even launch a fierce counterattack. Every single blow was just shrugged off by Owen before sending yet another poor knight flying out of the arena. We were completely cooked, according to the frantic bishop. Right then and there, I casually stepped into the room. Without missing a beat, Elena immediately started patching up the battered knights. My gaze swept across the chaotic scene, taking in the bishop gripping his twisted staff crafted out of fallen innocent girls, alongside Owen acting as his mindless puppet, while madness burned bright in the bishop's eyes and straight to his face. I dropped the bomb, admitting I totally underestimated the pure evil lurking inside the church. Sneering back at me, the bishop arrogantly claimed the church was absolute God and the ultimate embodiment of justice itself, pointing his crooked finger right at my chest. He commanded Owen to take me out. Charging forward with terrifying speed and brute force, Owen bolted straight for me, yet Alice abruptly jumped right in front of my path, parrying his lethal strike cleanly with her glowing golden sword, before sending him crashing backward through the air. Sheer terror flashed across the bishop's pale face, proudly announcing her title. Alice revealed herself as a holy light knight, and instantly passed divine judgment on him for preying on the weak, defiling the gods' trust, and daring to assault her master. Glancing down, the bishop finally spotted the sacred emblems gleaming on her armor, recognizing those exact legendary markings, reserved exclusively for the elite Round Table Knights. Panic set in hard, though he knew eliminating her was his only way out. Dark, crackling magic erupted in a wave straight from his staff, but Alice smoothly hoisted her blade high and unleashed a devastating technique known as Holy Light Judgment. That swirling dark energy was completely vaporized in a split second, closing the gap in a blinding flash of motion. She drove her sharp edge straight through his chest. His final moments were spent wondering how a true temple knight had managed to show up here, shattering into pieces. The cursed staff dissolved into brilliant golden light that streaked like shooting stars across the darkened sky. Faintly, I could swear I saw the sorrowful faces of all those young girls whose lifeless bodies were sacrificed to build that monstrosity. They were finally set free, while Owen snapped right back to his senses. With the bishop's death shattering the dark puppet spell for good, dropping to one knee before Alice, he offered his deep gratitude. Though I wasn't feeling particularly forgiving today, having T promptly disarm him and rip off his heavy helmet. Coldly, I informed him that he was officially under arrest, having served as the kingdom's ultimate shield and top knight, yet shockingly siding with the corrupt church against his own crowned king. Such an act was textbook treason, carrying a death sentence. Stubbornly, he argued that every move he made was driven by pure religious faith, letting out a cold laugh. I promised to expedite his journey so he could meet his God face to face. Then, facing all the captured soldiers and knights right there, I dropped the bomb that they had totally betrayed their king, and according to the law, both them and their families were facing execution. Desperate to save the families, Owen begged me, arguing they were totally innocent, before calling me a straight-up demon. Right back at him, I pointed out that his precious church had butchered innocent girls to forge magic weapons, making me ask who the real demon was. With a quick gesture, I ordered Tai E to execute Owen, and it was done. Total hysteria broke out among the captive soldiers, as they begged for mercy, prompting me to offer them a deal: bring me a church member or lead me straight to their hidden treasure within 24 hours, and their lives would be spared. Anyone failing to deliver anything useful was heading straight to the afterlife. Since the city gates were locked tight for entry only, nobody was stepping foot outside once I let them go. I immediately started inventorying the massive wealth of the church. 100,000 gold coins, alongside 100,000 pounds of grain, and countless jewels were all stashed away. Inside, then, the creepy basement was uncovered by us, where over 30 more imprisoned girls and piles of dead bodies were found. My blood was literally boiling as I realized killing these church freaks had been way too merciful. Bursting into the room in a rush, Tai reported that massive crowds had gathered outside, consisting of commoners and nobles who were demanding the release of the church members along with an apology to God. So I stepped outside to face them. More than 1,000 people were chanting that the church was innocent, while roughly a dozen nobles led the pack right at the front. Stepping forward with a bold stride, a noble named Coffee Bell demanded an explanation for why I had dared to attack the church. He argued that no law or doctrine permitted such a reckless move. With a cold glare, I asked if he was standing up for the church, to which he proudly answered yes, because the church supposedly represented God and justice. Bypassing any further debate, I immediately commanded my knights to arrest him and confiscate all his family assets, not backing down. Another noble named Fox Warren threw a fit of protest, claiming his family held the noble rank of counts, and insisting that God's divine will could never be defied, scratching my ear dismissively. I told my guys to lock him up right beside Bell, giving him the exact same treatment. Two high-ranking nobles had just been busted back-to-back, and I didn't even flinch. Leaving the entire crowd falling completely silent, paranoia gripped everyone as they feared they would be next on the chopping block. Switching up my strategy instead of wasting time arguing, I extended an open invitation to all of them, stepping right inside the chapel to check it out for themselves. I told every single person that doors were wide open to all, even welcoming down-and-out vagrants from the riverbank. A single-file line was organized by me, guiding them straight down into the basement area. They filed down there one by one, buzzing with hype and curiosity, only to re-emerge completely silent and ghost-white. Even the remaining high-status nobles were left totally speechless after laying eyes on the captive victims and the tragic remains. Once the raw facts were witnessed by everyone present, my question was tossed out again. Should the church members be set free? Is an apology due, or should these absolute monsters who treated precious kids like total garbage face execution? The crowd totally lost it. Off with their heads, put an end to them, just like back in Dana City. Public outrage completely handled the heavy lifting for me. Any lingering complaints from the arrogant nobles were swallowed hard that afternoon. The royal city practically ran red with bloodshed, yet the citizens cheered loudly for every single act of justice. Emma, you watched the whole chaotic scene unfold from the shadows. Her cunning scheme to use the church as a clever distraction, while sneaking away with media, had completely backfired on her. She openly admitted she stood zero chance against me anymore, especially with Alice standing by my side, who happened to be her ultimate natural counter. Quietly slipping away from the city limits, she vowed to stage a comeback when she could summon a monstrous demon dragon all by herself. Over at the Grand Palace, King Lance was torn apart by inner conflict. He was low-key stoked that the corrupt church was gone, yet terrified of the payback coming from the Holy Temple, since the church's overarching parent organization would never let an entire branch vanish without a trace. Elite and ruthless knights were bound to be dispatched against Lane Kingdom. Then I strode right into the hall and laid out my detailed report. Exactly 312 church conspirators had been neutralized, leaving 0 survivors behind. Only those who cooperated by snitching on others were spared. 5 distinct territories were successfully reclaimed for the crown. Mind-boggling amounts of hidden treasure were seized. A comprehensive written dossier detailing all the church's vile crimes was handed directly to the king, while urging him to publish it nationwide for everyone to see. Lance read through it, caught his breath, and declared, "I've actually done the right thing here." Midio was utterly confused by this shift, having stressed out over temple vengeance just moments prior for a brief second, yet the documented atrocities were just too extreme to sweep under the rug. Telling me to hit the hay, he swore he'd map out my new turf by the next day. Options for my land were supposed to be ready. Bringing up his exact words, I jogged his memory. Picking my own property was the deal we made. Giving in to my demand, he handed over a jaw-dropping estate. Serving previously as the sovereign's private sanctuary, it was pure luxury. Fully equipped living quarters came standard with the place. A gorgeous swimming pool was continuously fed by natural thermal springs. Since his wife's passing, the monarch hadn't stepped foot here once. All my hustle today finally paid off, and now this slice of heaven was mine. Honestly, this was the least they could hook me up with. Ordering everyone to clean up and crash, I let them unwind. Carrying the whole squad, Elena proved she was the MVP. Every single one of my people stayed breathing because of her clutch healing magic. Even right after the brawl, she volunteered to boil some water for me. Brushing off her offer, I told her to look after herself first. True to form, Alice flat-out refused to budge from my side. Rooted firmly like a carved statue, she locked down the area. Demanding she stand down, I grabbed her wrist and pulled her toward the bathhouse. Stammering in total shock, she let out a breathless gasp. Teasing her about sweating bullets all day, I gave her a smirk. Not being a fan of that workout stench, I wanted her fresh. The vibe was finally right for some serious chill time. Unwinding properly at last felt amazing. Boasting a gorgeous swimming pool, the estate was top-tier. Natural hot springs kept the water steaming constantly. Soaking in those healing waters felt like it lasted for ages. Endless days of marching and fighting made this break well-earned. Floating effortlessly in the soothing warmth, I took inventory of my loot. Checking my stats and inventory, I reviewed everything amassed so far. My storage grid was currently overloaded. 300,000 pounds of grain were stockpiled across Aju Town, Dana City, and the church outpost. Combined with the assets of those two disgraced noble houses I raided, around 200,000 gold coins sat in my vault. Splitting half our earnings with the king had already happened before this total. Various precious gems were also stashed away. Though pocket-sized, they would fetch a serious fortune if liquidated. My military strength had scaled up impressively. 10 elite heavy cavalry units were unlocked straight from the system. Alice stood ready as my holy light knight. Elena backed me up as my personal healer witch. 20 loyal followers completed the roster, securing my official territory so the system logs it should trigger something huge. Fingers were crossed for some epic bonus drops. Knowing how glitchy my system usually behaves, though it might just crash and leave me hanging again. Irritation lingered slightly over the fact that completely wiping out that entire church branch had failed to unlock a single bonus reward. You'd assume leveling a major national religious institution would at least cost you peanuts. System out of nowhere, Alice dropped the news that Princess Media had rolled up to visit, giving her the green light. I told her to send Media right on through. Recovering in the pool, I at least had my swim trunks on to keep things chill so nothing sketchy was going down. Thankfully, the moment Medio stepped foot in the area and locked eyes with me, her cheeks flushed bright pink, while her gaze started darting all over the place, playfully calling her out for coming over just to check me out. I flashed a grin, completely flustered by my comment. She immediately fired back that she wasn't hard on the eyes herself, meaning I wasn't getting the short end of the stick. Telling her to take all the time she needed to get an eyeful, I threw my arms out wide, making her face turn an even deeper shade of crimson. She quickly pivoted to a totally different topic to save face, mentioning that her old man was convinced that crashing with me would help her finally master her wild magic, considering I had Elena on deck to tutor her, and wasn't out here prejudiced against witches or demon girls. King Lance was genuinely pushing for her to relocate to my territory while catching me off guard. The idea wasn't a total deal-breaker. Having actual royalty hanging around could definitely come in handy, though I had to point out a major logistical snag. What kind of cover story was she supposed to rock? A high-ranking princess setting up camp at a lord's private estate sounded super, thus the only scenario where this would low-key make sense is if she ended up marrying the lord himself. Tossing that out super casually as a total joke. I kept it light, yet Media literally froze dead in her tracks. Even Alice over by the doorway stole a sneaky peek in our direction. After an awkward, extended silence, Media confessed that she did harbor some real feelings for me, even if she wasn't quite ready to lock down a marriage. Just yet that totally blindsided me since I was just messing around. Whereas she took the whole thing dead seriously, pushing myself up from the water. I asked if she was being for real. Giving me a puzzled look, she seemed totally lost by my reaction, sinking back into the pool. I told her to just drop the whole thing. She could totally tag along with me without needing a wedding ring. Honestly, having a gorgeous woman rolling with my squad wasn't an L I would ever turn down, shaking her head. Media countered by saying, I actually made a valid point about securing a proper identity, before turning to leave and hash it out with her father. Left sitting by myself, I tried processing everything that just went down. What started as a joke ended up with her practically admitting she was into me. And now things were getting real, planning to chat with her old man about wedding logistics. Here is the catch: my master plan low-key involved taking over this entire continent, including Lane Kingdom, if I ended up wedding the princess, and subsequently seizing control of her father's turf. That would be super cringe. Waging war against your father-in-law is definitely not a flex. I totally decided to brush it off. Even if Lance gave the green light, some chick wasn't about to derail my roadmap. Throwing on my gear, I marched straight to the exit. Alice was giving me a totally weird vibe, prompting me to ask what was up. She immediately snapped back to her poker face and stated nothing was wrong since shielding me was her solo mission. Something was clearly bothering her in the back of my mind. Yet she was system summoned and 100% ride or die loyal. Betrayal wasn't in her DNA, so I let the whole thing slide. I crashed so hard that night, totally sleeping through midnight and missing my summon window. Waking up the following morning, I instantly fired up the system, triggering 2 more heavy nights. My army kept scaling up in power daily. A late was already posted outside, alongside a carriage and escort service. Everywhere wasn't required, I told him, though he insisted it remained his prime duty. We rolled out toward the palace. A map was spread across a table by King Lance. He instructed me to claim any unclaimed zone, as my territory following yesterday's showdown. Several sectors had been liberated from church grip, meaning options were actually plentiful. 4 cities and 10 towns made up Lane Kingdom, spread out across a massive expanse, while a mountain range stretched right from the capital all the way down to Aliena's former village. I meticulously analyzed them. Anything situated in the center was instantly ruled out. Some sleepy, cozy spot to chill out was definitely not my vibe. A frontier region was what I needed instead, somewhere featuring combat zones, where expansion and growth through conquest, where possible warfare, served as absolute fuel for my ambitions. Leaving merely a couple of choices, the northern border bordered the Hill Kingdom, which outscaled Lane Kingdom tenfold in size. Initiating a war against them right now would be total suicide. Not yet, because the western border hit different back. Then hiding right, there was a region known as Twin Tower City, getting its name from two massive highlands within its borders. Stretching past it sat the joint military defense line, holding off the Beastmen tribes. This was the raw frontier, sketchy as hell, yet Loki packed with mad opportunities. As I pointed straight at Twin Tower City, Lance immediately tried to talk me out of my choice. He argued that the western border was constantly catching smoke. Even with the Allied defense line-up, Beastmen raiding squads kept breaking through over a dozen times every single year. It was easily the most toxic territory in the entire kingdom. He suggested I lock down a spot way closer to the capital. Instead, I told him to chill and not stress. I had picked this exact place on purpose. As long as I stood my ground there, any beast man daring to cross that line would find a one-way ticket straight to the afterlife. What I kept to myself in that moment was that I actually wanted all that smoke. Every single battle meant free resources, secured more land expansion, and serious combat XP for my growing army. Twin Tower City wasn't some huge L, it was the ultimate launchpad for everything I was about to build. King Lance could tell my mind was completely made up. He didn't try to block my move, but he dropped his daughter into the mix. He warned that if I locked in Twin Tower City, he couldn't let Midia tie the knot with me, at least not anytime soon. That zone was way too dangerous for a princess. I was totally shook by that reveal. Midia had actually gone straight to her dad about getting married, and Lance was apparently down to give his blessing just as long as I didn't claim a wild border territory. The subtext was crystal clear here: secure a safe location, and the princess is officially mine. Yet I wasn't playing this game just for Midia. I needed the absolute best turf for my master plan. I told Lance I completely respected his worries, though Twin Tower City was precisely where I needed to be stationed. The entire kingdom had been held back for years by useless NPCs like Owen and corrupt factions like the Church. If I successfully fortified the western border, it would give the whole kingdom some serious breathing room and let him finally focus on ruling properly. Lance was low-key touched by that pitch, as he admitted. Not a single other noble or high-ranking minister had ever put down that level of dedication after chewing it over. He finally dropped a promise on me, provided I could lock down and stabilize Twin Tower City. He was still totally down to hand over Midia's hand in marriage. Convincing himself she would wait it out, I flashed a grin, but completely ghosted the wedding part of the talk. My mind was way too busy with bigger moves. He shoved 3 crucial items right into my hands, featuring an official land contract for Twin Towers City, alongside a royal charter gifting me total authority as its lord, plus an authentic seal serving as absolute proof of my identity as the legitimate ruler. Because without these, not a single soul in that city would buy my claim. He casually dropped that a knight going by the name Trenton was currently running the show at Twin Tower City, acting on behalf of the whole kingdom. Lance hyped up Trenton as capable, having handled beast attacks and sudden invasions back in the day, urging me to check in with him if things went sideways. I was cool with that, just as long as Trenton didn't pull any shady moves on my turf. I could definitely find a way to use him. With all the gear and paperwork safely secured, I rounded up my crew and shipped out without throwing a proper goodbye at Midia. Goodbyes always made things awkward and heavy, and I had zero time for emotional baggage. Slowing down my grind, Alice piped up, mentioning Midia was stalking us from the castle ramparts. I kept my eyes forward, refusing to look back, and instead hit Alice with a question, asking how on earth she managed to spot the princess all the way up there while supposedly locked in on guarding me. She came back with an innocent shrug, arguing that keeping tabs on the princess's coordinates didn't mess with her bodyguard duties in the slightest. I just told her fine, whatever. She totally won that round, while Elena chuckled softly behind us, saying she had literally never seen this playful vibe from me before, while looking low-key surprised that Alice, who always gave off that freezing cold, serious aura, actually harbored such a relatable human side. We made great time on the road this trip. Every single person was mounted up now, even the standard followers. They weren't top-tier warhorses, but sturdy enough to double our traveling pace. This kingdom was genuinely tiny. What would have dragged on for months back in my original universe got knocked out in barely a day, landing us right at Finland town by nightfall, giving off major LU town vibes, still way bigger likely given how close it sits to the border line. Local commerce was buzzing intensely right here. I called the shots that we'd crash here for the night, before pushing forward to Twin Tower City come sunrise. Little did I know that Tinglin Moore, the town's lord, Was already low-key stressing over my grand entrance rumors detailing my capital rampage had officially blown up slaughtering church folks, executing high-ranking nobles, and entirely wiping out whole bloodlines. He straight up labeled me a total monster. His right-hand advisor suggested we'd probably stay low-key, chill provided nobody went out of their way to trigger us, leaving Tinglin, agreeing to keep his hands completely clean. Yet Tinglin carried a heavy secondary burden. He ran massive business operations alongside Trenton, the big boss, currently running Twin Tower City, meaning if Trenton started beef with me, Finland Town could easily get caught in the heavy crossfire. He dispatched a fast runner straight to Trenton, delivering a heads-up that his brand new lord was inbound, and advising him to seriously tone down his ego. Later on, Aliena parked herself right across from me and meticulously plated up the home-cooked meal. She offered a soft apology regarding the humble. I told her it definitely beat any standard restaurant food, yet she shouldn't waste those magical healing hands on kitchen chores. She smiled sweetly, noting nobody gets hurt every single day, so she might as well pamper me through alternative methods. She pointed out how all my knights were total brute guys incapable of looking after anyone with actual care. Suddenly, Alice piped up from right by the doorway, declaring she was far from a brute guy. Her expression remained dead serious, though the remark felt kind of hilarious coming straight from someone giving off major vibes of an ice-cold warrior queen. She had clearly been eavesdropping on our whole dialogue, capturing every single syllable linked to my name. Aliena smoothed things over without missing a beat. She noted that Alice handled bodyguarding duties for me, while she took full charge of keeping me fed and comfortable. Forming a flawless division of labor, Alice went silent, seemingly giving in to the arrangement. Post-dinner, Aliena stepped away to clear off the dining table. That exact moment brought an audio snippet that caused her to freeze dead in her tracks. A couple of guys were whispering nearby in the shadows, exchanging hush-hush gossip about Trenton actually acting as the real mastermind behind Twin Tower City, and tossing around random insults, calling me a total nobody with zero right to be stepping into his shoes. A sneaky plot was brought up involving slipping poison into the feed down at the stables long before our arrival at Twin Tower City. Tomorrow, every single horse would be completely knocked out and immobilized, leaving us totally vulnerable while giving Trenton total dominance right out of the gate. My knights were dismissed as nothing to stress over, since this happened to be Finland Town, giving them hometown advantage and making them feel totally untouchable. One guy insisted on sticking around to watch the animals chow down on the tainted food, just to double-check everything before clearing out. Once they vanished, Aliena slipped out into the cool night air and tailed them without making a sound. Sure enough, those two dudes made a beeline straight for the stables, where they whipped out little pouches of toxic powder and dumped it straight into the livestock feed. Then, grabbing hold of the heavy buckets, they marched over toward our mounts, obsessed with watching every single beast consume the poisoned grain before they would finally call it a night. Peering out from the deep shadows with narrowed eyes, Aliena knew she had busted a major threat, and now she just needed to figure out her next move. The saboteurs had been spotted by Aliena, yet she played it super low-key, avoiding any confrontation or shouting matches. She patiently waited for them to clear the area before casting her restorative magic right over the horse troughs to completely wash away whatever chemical they had mixed in. Then she planted herself right there beside the stable door, paranoid they might pull a sneaky comeback. Roughly around midnight, I stumbled upon her, having woken up to handle a late-night urge, and noticed a tiny silhouette slumped against the wooden post close to the horses, while fighting hard to keep her heavy eyelids open. It turned out to be Aliena, and she spilled every single detail, from the guys whispering about Trenton being the true mastermind ruling Twin Tower City to the nasty scheme of drugging our animals so they would crash hard out on the trail, and how she had stood guard over the stables ever since. Words completely failed me in that moment. This incredible girl had ridden with me from the absolute start, and here she was sacrificing her own beauty sleep just to shield my livestock from some lame petty trick. I let her know she could easily just cast her recovery spell once more until morning, letting my guys take over the night shift for security. She stared at me like I had literally just dropped fire, totally shook that she hadn't thought of such a basic move. I sent her off to crash, yet that whole mess gave me massive red flags about Trenton. King Lance mentioned Twin Tower City had dealt with over a dozen beastmen raids yearly, but somehow Trenton always walked away completely unfazed. That made zero sense. There had to be some shady backdoor deal going down between him and the beastmen, and now his crew was low-key trying to sabotage me before I even rolled up. If Trenton turned out to be a total snake, I'd have zero issues taking him out. Right before hitting the sack, I summoned my nightly knights, getting 2 heavy cavalry as my squad steadily powered up. At this rate, in less than a year, I'd be rocking over 1,000 heavy riders, more than enough to flex on most kingdoms in this brutal world of swords and shields. Dawn broke, and we restocked our gear in Finland town before riding out. The guys who spiked the feed were probably spying on us as we left, totally confident their poison would kick in later. They had no clue Alina had already fixed the whole situation. Twin Tower City's turf was seriously impressive, spanning 3 towns worth of land under one roof. Crossing past the boundary line, endless fields of crops came into view, bleeding out into massive open grasslands beyond. Near the tree line, scattered clusters of houses dotted the landscape, giving off a deceptive vibe of total peace. 2 more hours in the saddle, and the city skyline finally popped up ahead. It was built right along a massive lake, locked down by towering stone ramparts. A skyline of buildings in all shapes and sizes rose inside, anchored by a gorgeous castle dead in the center. It was a legit medieval fortress, way more epic than Princess Midia's old forest hideout, and this was about to become my new home base. My crew let out gasps of pure awe at the view, while I stayed silent and pulled up my system panel. The territory slot was still completely blank. Then it clicked. It had only popped active at the Lord's Hall back in Ayu Town. Stepping inside the fortress was likely required first for the system to finally log my arrival. Right by the urban gates, swarms of locals packed tightly along both edges of the street dead. In the middle stood a towering knight, flanked closely by 4 subordinates. Knight Commander Trenton stepped up to introduce himself and offer a formal greeting while I just smirked, keeping my guard up. Challenging him directly, I asked if these folks genuinely showed up of their own free will, or if he orchestrated this whole low-key performance. He insisted they gathered voluntarily out of excitement to catch a glimpse of their new lord, prompting me to ask if they were actually here instead to watch me completely embarrass myself. His expression twitched instantly as reality hit him hard. Our mounts were looking ridiculously healthy and full of life, proving his sneaky sabotage attempt had totally flopped. Bouncing back without missing a beat, he smoothly urged us to head on toward the castle, holding up a hand. I told him to pause, my gaze shifting to the crowds lining the pavement. Empty gazes and sheer dread filled their eyes, leaving zero room for any shred of respect or optimism. These people were clearly suffering big time under Trenton's miserable rule. Stepping right up, I made it a point to introduce myself, declaring myself as Count Zhuang Hua, their brand new master. Every existing law would be thoroughly reviewed later. I promised, but right now I had a sweet bonus to drop. A full pound of grain was being handed out to anyone who made it down to the castle square within the next 30 minutes. No exceptions made for anyone whatsoever. Dead silence broke into sheer shock across the masses. One courageous voice cried out, asking if this was some kind of joke. Dead serious was my response. And should anyone dare block them from grabbing their rightful share, they could report it straight to my loyal guy, Knight Commander Tai, who would gladly chop off the troublemaker's head as a formal apology. Not a single soul dared to utter a peep after that threat. Trenton's jaw was practically twitching out of control. Right behind me, Twin Tower City housed a population of at least 5,000 residents, meaning handing out 5,000 pounds of grain just like that was wild. He must have thought I completely lost my mind. Yet securing the loyalty of the locals proved to be infinitely more valuable than a few thousand pounds of food. Crossing the castle threshold, my boots finally echoed inside the magnificent Great Hall. After pinging an unclaimed sector, my interface suddenly lit up and verified my legal paperwork. Once my legal documents got cleared, Twin Tower City was officially locked in as my sovereign domain. For the very first time, the Lord system went completely live. That was right when the glitching kicked off, bringing along those classic crackling, static, and error noises. Holding my breath tightly, I silently prayed my rewards wouldn't glitch out and vanish again. Miraculously, the system stabilized this time around, dropping a couple of sweet perks into my lap. A fresh ability dubbed talent recruitment alongside a handy starter care package. Packed tightly inside that beginner bundle were an iron mine, a fully functional workshop, and a crew of 10 craftsmen. Basically, I was handed a complete, ready-to-roll weapons factory, a raw materials production plant, and skilled labor all bundled into one sweet deal. For someone trying to grind a military force from scratch, this was absolute perfection. As I pulled up my refreshed system stats, Twin Tower City was now officially logged as my registered territory, though its prosperity rating sat at a flat 0, which made total sense since I had just touched down. My skill tree now flexed 2 distinct abilities, Night Summoning and Talent Recruitment. Additionally, a brand new building tab popped up on the interface, showcasing my workshop alongside a fine print note at the bottom stating that extra features would auto-unlock as my prosperity meter started ticking up. At long last, the system was finally evolving into what it was meant to be, transforming from a basic nightly loot dispenser into an actual, heavy-duty Lord management dashboard. I always knew this thing had major hidden potential, and those annoying system bugs were just holding back its true power. Right as Trenton opened his mouth to start rambling again, evidently trying to flex his authority over the room, I cut him off because dealing with his ego wasn't on my priority list. Figuring out the exact capabilities of my brand new system upgrades came first. A satisfied smirk crossed my face. The Lord's dashboard had finally woken up properly, and claiming Twin Tower City was only the opening act. Equipped with this fresh talent recruitment feature, I was given the perk of summoning one elite unit per week. Triggering it immediately sent a blinding flash of white light across the room, and a mysterious figure draped in a green robe materialized right in front of me. Stepping forward, he formally introduced himself as Zio Hai. Hearing that particular moniker hit me like a truck, since it shared the exact same name as one of the legendary administrative masterminds from ancient Chinese history. Before my mind could run too wild, however, he quickly chimed in to clarify that he wasn't that specific historical icon. Turns out he just shares the exact same name. His skills wouldn't let me down, or so he swore to me anyway. System goodies always hit different with top-tier quality, so I totally trusted him until it hit me out of nowhere. Trenton had literally been standing right there while I was summoning Zio He into the room, my whole body locked up, stressing if he'd caught the whole freak show a dude, just materializing out of thin air like that. Yet when I probed him, the guy acted totally chill and normal, just casually rambling about lunch and work reports. Either the system straight up blocked his radar, or he honestly missed the whole thing entirely. Either way, a massive weight lifted off my shoulders. The absolute last thing I needed was locals thinking some dark magic possessed my soul. Trenton finally jumped right into his briefing. Twin Tower City housed a population of 13,000 souls, with 5,500 inside the walls and 7,500 outside. Then he hit me with the exact part I was dreading, claiming the city's food stockpiles were running bone dry, because they kept feeding grain and gold to the Allied Defense Line troops every time beastmen raided the borders. Whenever beastmen launched an attack, he argued that feeding the civilians would leave us with zero rations left, leaving us completely empty-handed. I saw right through his shady game plan instantly, seeing a territory this huge with endless farmland stretching out toward the horizon, and here the guy was trying to claim they couldn't spare a mere 5,000 pounds of grain. He was low-key trying to make me break my promise to the citizens on day one, which was a major power trip move. I cut him off mid-sentence and stripped him of every bit of administrative power right then and there. Starting right from that exact second, Zio He was gonna take over every single internal affair across the entire city. Trenton immediately tried to push back, arguing that local politics were way too messy for a newbie, and his expertise was essential. I stared him down coldly, reminding him his sole domain was military defense, and nothing more whatsoever. Internal politics were none of his concern. Was I making myself crystal clear to him? He finally backed down, though I could still spot that pure defiance burning in his gaze. The guy genuinely figured that without his backing, not a single soul in this town would ever obey me. He was about to learn how dead wrong he was soon enough. I officially swore in Zio Hai to serve as the brand new Minister of Internal Affairs for Twin Tower City, and handed him 2 heavily armored knights with a crew of 4 backup enforcers backing him up, and given full power to take out any public official who dared to stonewall him. No need to run it by me first. Shao. He accepted it coolly, heading out immediately to tackle his very first mission, taking stock of the warehouses, and getting at least 10,000 pounds of grain staged right in the plaza without ever asking where the supplies would come from. And without questioning a single thing, he flashed a confident grin and got straight to work. That swagger told me everything I needed to know about his absolute game. Shifting my focus back to Trenton, I demanded a breakdown of the military situation. Operating as a frontier outpost, staring down beastman territory, Twin Towers City naturally boasted its very own garrison, totaling 500 soldiers alongside 5 knights, including Trenton himself, plus 100 swordsmen, 200 spearmen, and 200 archers. Trenton flexed, insisting proudly that this squad was the crown's absolute peak, even flexing harder than Owen's Royal Guard back in the capital. I hit him with a reality check. If they were such an elite force, why couldn't they handle the beastman threat? Mumbling under his breath, he blamed the beastmen for being too overpowered and claimed they needed allied reinforcements to push the horde back. I tucked that excuse away and let it slide for now. Not yet, at least, before Elena stepped in to inform me that the townsfolk had packed the square. Stepping outside, Trenton's jaw practically hit the pavement. Massive mounds of grain towered across the plaza, while every single city official stood at attention, terrified, with absolute fear written in their eyes. Shao. He had already completely seized control. Whatever moves he pulled in those brief minutes were more than enough to bring the entire corrupt bureaucracy to heel. Scaling the raised platform overlooking the square, I addressed the assembled crowd, taking the mic as their brand-new lord, Count Xuanghua, as I pointed toward the massive grain piles, and announced it as their official welcome gift, just like I promised them. Faces lit up across the crowd as cheers erupted everywhere. Yet before handing out a single kernel, I let them know I had a few questions. First, a lord. Actually asking everyday commoners for their input was totally unheard of around these parts. Stepping out of the crowd with shaky hands, an elderly local muttered that they were just clueless peasants who probably couldn't handle a noble's interrogation. Chill out, is what I told them, since I only wanted to hear about things they'd personally witnessed and lived through. Firing off my first question, I brought up the rumor that Twin Tower City faced Beastman raids over a dozen times every single year. Was that legit? The old man looked super confused. He admitted that Beastmen did show up. Though a dozen times was a massive exaggeration, it was honestly more like 2 or 3 times annually, with barely 10 Beastmen rolling up each time. Definitely not a catastrophe. Wild, right? Trenton had fed the exact same inflated stats to King Lance, which was wild. Someone had been gaslighting the crown for years, probably to justify demanding bigger budgets and pocketing all the extra loot. I dropped my second question. I'd also heard that Allied defense squads rushed in to fend off the Beastmen. Each time, had anyone actually laid eyes on these reinforcements? Right as the old man prepared to speak, Trenton abruptly cut him off, claiming these commoners were clueless and demanding I direct my questions to him instead. I pivoted and glared at him with dead eyes. I told him to zip it, clarifying that I was questioning the citizens, and not him. Did he copy that? Absolute dead silence fell over the square. Every single set of eyes darted between me and Trenton. The air was so tense you could practically slice it. Trenton's expression darkened, though he stayed silent, fully aware that with my elite knights posted right behind me, making a scene would only backfire massively on him. Turning back to the old local, I waited for his response. The dark truth about Twin Tower City was finally dropping, and Trenton knew it. Every single lie fed to the throne, every coin he'd stashed away, every shady deal struck with the Beastmen. It was all about to unravel right here in the public square, right in front of the folks he'd been exploiting. For years, I could totally feel it. This was going to be satisfying as hell. Getting publicly chewed out in front of the very people he'd bossed around for years was a massive ego check, and Trenton was clearly losing his mind over it with my fierce knight looming right behind me. Bro, he had zero choice but to totally swallow his pride. A low murmur slipped out as he admitted defeat, promptly telling him to get lost. I ordered him to step aside, witnessing their once untouchable knight commander being treated like absolute trash. Locals finally broke their silence. Whispers erupted as someone stepped up to claim that they had literally never seen any Allied reinforcements show up to help, even though the officials had used that exact excuse to squeeze extra taxes out of everyone for years. Someone else chimed in, describing how rich and productive the surrounding farmland was. Though after all those endless taxes were paid off, hardworking families were left with absolutely nothing to eat. Tears streamed down their faces mid-sentence. With every single word spoken, another ugly layer of Trenton's deep corruption got exposed. Trenton couldn't just stay quiet anymore, screaming defensively. He insisted that every single territory collected taxes, demanding how they could possibly feed the military, otherwise the very army protecting these ungrateful commoners, and fueling the Allied defense line with supplies. He frantically warned me not to fall for their petty complaints. That was my absolute breaking point, so I commanded Tai E to grab him. The second Tai E drew his steel and grabbed hold of Trenton, the city guards instantly reached for their weapons, casting a cool, deadpan stare their way. I asked if they were seriously plotting to jump their legitimate lord. Was this an outright rebellion? I questioned, reminding them that the last guy who dared to rebel against me had his entire bloodline wiped out completely down to the family dog, and inviting them to try their luck. If they wanted that fate, they were welcome to step up. Nervous glances bounced back and forth among the soldiers. Dropping their gear and backing off was the order I gave them next. Complying meant I would pretend nothing ever happened. Lowering his sword, a lone knight took a cautious step back, followed quickly by a second, then a third. Before you knew it, they had all surrendered without a single blow. Word of what I pulled off back in the capital had already reached these parts, making nobody brave enough to test me. Turning back toward Trenton, I raised my voice for everyone to hear, loud enough to echo across the plaza. It didn't matter to me who he used to work for or what kind of excuses he had cooked up. Twin Tower City belonged strictly to me now, and these citizens were my people. His crimes against them were totally unforgivable. Right then and there, I handed down a death sentence. Dead silence fell across the public square. Even the everyday folks who had been loud and hype while calling out his sins suddenly clammed up with their hearts pounding fast, all the color totally drained right out of Trenton's face. Stuttering hard, he argued that I had no right to ice him since he was a high-ranking noble and a knight church law supposedly gave elites a free pass from execution. That was the exact loophole letting guys like him do whatever low-key toxic stuff they wanted to commoners for ages, reminding him that I had already completely wiped out the church. I pointed out that their rules meant absolute zilch now, before he could even drop another word. I flicked my hand, Talia's blade flashed down swiftly, and Trenton's severed head bounced across the cold stone, frozen in place. The soldiers who used to serve under him stood stiff, their hands visibly trembling, shifting my focus away from them. I turned toward the nervous citizens, telling everyone there was nothing left to stress about. Trash officials like Trenton honestly deserved to get canceled stepping up as their new lord. I promised I'd have their backs. Then I dropped a major announcement that flipped the script effective right now. Every single old tax was totally abolished. Farmers would only have to cough up 30% of their harvest. Merchants would just hand over 30% of their income. And beyond that setup, there wouldn't be any other random fees popping up, no hidden charges or extra catches, just a flat 30%. Period. Disbelief rippled right through the massive crowd back under Trenton. Combined taxes had skyrocketed past 90%. People were barely scraping by in survival mode, yet here I was letting them know they get to keep a solid 70% of everything. They make an old man with a shaky voice asked if this was actually real, and I assured him it definitely was. Instantly, the entire square dropped down onto their knees. Men, women, seniors, and kids all bowing low while thanking me profusely for these folks. This was way more than just a political update. It literally meant the line between starving out and actually living, telling them to stand up. I urged them to go get their grain. Once the civilians had cleared out of the area, I strode right over toward the soldiers. They all hit the ground and knelt right away, reassuring them. I stated that nobody was getting punished for their past actions. Whatever happened under Trenton is straight-up history now, because starting today, 3 brand new rules are locked in, and crossing any of them is an instant death sentence. Rule 1. My orders demand total obedience without a single question asked. Rule 2. Retreating mid-battle without my explicit green light is forbidden. Rule 3. Absolutely no bullying, harassment, or shaking down civilians. Not even a single needle. I pressed them on whether these terms could be followed. Only a weak and scattered murmur came back first. I let them know I couldn't hear a damn thing, so the second response roared back loud and clear, bouncing fiercely off the towering stone walls. Good enough for now, since discipline takes time to build. Tai was officially named the fresh Knight Commander, and I had him march the troops off to whip them into shape. Then, he was summoned inside the castle, so we could plot strategy. With all the internal drama finally cleared out, it was time to grind out my system build. Prosperity points were urgently needed to unlock fresh features, and I was totally hyped to see what was dropping next. Just the knight summoning and talent recruitment alone had already proven to be wildly off. He turned out to be every bit the powerhouse I wanted in the brief window. Since touching down here, he had already dissected Twin Towers City inside and out, the local agriculture, industry, commerce, fishing, literally everything. We burned the midnight oil, talking deep into the night to map out a master development blueprint for the whole territory. Control of the iron mine and workshop, straight out of my starter pack, was handed over to him. Right before he dropped a heavy reality check on me, the Allied defense line sat a cool 50 kilometers to the west, while Lane Kingdom was mandated to ship them 50,000 pounds of grain plus 10,000 gold coins on the monthly. As their mandatory tribute, Twin Tower City's slice of that crushing burden came out to 10,000 pounds of grain, along with 2,000 gold pieces. An Allied envoy was scheduled to roll up in 2 days to collect it from Trennan's old estate. We had pocketed 30,000 pounds of grain and 20,000 gold coins, which sounded like a massive bag at first glance. Yet if hefty chunks had to get funneled to the Alliance every month while we simultaneously tried to fund city upgrades, our treasury would go completely broke in no time flat, which probably explained why Trenton. The local folks had been bled dry by ruthless taxation, with every last drop swallowed up by the Alliance contribution. I totally told Zio not to stress about it at all, since I had secret stashes of gold and grain hidden away. Whether I would actually fork any of that over to the Alliance was a whole different vibe. Entirely handing over my hard-earned loot, just like that, was definitely not on my radar. I wanted to scope out these Alliance clowns first before making any moves. Meanwhile, Shao rubbed his hands together with a greedy grin and immediately started grilling me about development funds. I told him to meet me down at the warehouse tomorrow, where 100,000 pounds of grain would be waiting for him, along with 50,000 gold coins to jumpstart the operation. His eyes lit up like crazy at the sight of those resources, meaning Twin Tower City's glow-up could kick off right away and totally crush it, while sending my prosperity rating straight through the roof and unlocking whatever sweet rewards the system had prepped for me next. Even though the Allied defense line was built to shield us from nasty beastmen attacks, Twin Tower City still kept getting raided multiple times a year, which honestly made zero sense whatsoever. We were dropping massive amounts of gold and grain on them monthly. Yet those beastmen kept slipping right past their lines. Either that defense perimeter was full of major plot holes, or they were just ghosting on their actual duties. Either way, hiding behind my own walls and waiting for disaster wasn't my style. I decided I needed to check out what lay beyond that boundary myself. If those beastmen could waltz right into my turf, then I could definitely return the favor. Before I could even map out my next move, a frantic follower burst through the doors with breaking news. A pack of beastmen had just been spotted heading straight for Twin Tower City. Talk about perfect timing. I'd been dying to see what these creatures looked like up close and figure out how they threw down in a fight. So I told T to rally a strike team and make sure they hauled back at least one captive alive. From the high stone ramparts, I tracked their slow advance. There were 10 of them, towering near 2 meters with sickly green skin bearing jagged fangs and gripping crude stone hammers along with makeshift weapons. They didn't pull a reckless charge on the walls, though. Instead, they split up to circle the perimeter, studying our defenses closely like they were sketching out a battle map. Now that was low-key fascinating, because this wasn't a raid at all. It looked way more like a full-blown recon mission. Fidgeting nervously, one of the veteran Twin Towers knights stepped up to voice his concerns. According to him, these beastmen were absolute units with insane strength. Still, he figured they would probably just grab some grub and peace out. Cutting his losses, he advised us to just let them walk away. I immediately hit him with a reality check, asking if that was their permanent game plan. Were they seriously just gonna stand there and do nothing while their own people got looted? Challenging their dignity, I demanded to know what happened to their knightly pride. Overwhelmed by shame, every single one of them dropped their gaze to the dirt. Gesturing toward T, I told him it was time to show these guys how real warriors actually handled beastmen. Riding out at the head of a 10-man heavy cavalry squad, T took the lead. Spotting the approaching riders, the beastmen didn't feel any panic at all. If anything, they looked totally hyped. Based on their past encounters, human soldiers were absolute pushovers. Even the ones in full plate armor could easily be smashed to pieces with stone hammers. Howling into the air with intense anticipation, they braced for an easy win. Little did they know they were walking straight into a nightmare. Charging forward with his iron spear leveled, Tai made his move. In a flash, he drove his weapon straight through the first beastman's chest. The rest of the knights tore through the remaining enemy squad with equal ease. Before you knew it, 9 beastmen were left lifeless on the bloody dirt. Leaving just one alive on purpose, the squad secured a prisoner. Dragged right before me, the captive was dumped onto the ground. Turning my attention to the Twin Tower soldiers, I asked them if these were really the unstoppable beastmen they had been stressing over, leaving them totally speechless. Their entire worldview had just been shattered in broad daylight. For years, Trenton had weaponized the beastman threat to keep the local population terrified and milk them for every penny. Now they had just watched my knights wipe out a beastman squad like it was nothing. Dropping the hammer, I warned them that anyone caught pulling cowardly moves in future battles would face zero mercy from me. This time, their response hit different. A huge chunk of them were commoners whose families had just benefited from my tax cuts and free grain. They were genuinely starting to vibe with my leadership, not out of pure fear, but because I was actually fighting for them. For the first time ever, it clicked for them. Beastmen weren't invincible, and human warriors could actually hunt and capture them. Refusing to cooperate, the captured beastman stubbornly kept his mouth shut. Turning his head away in defiance, he demanded a fair duel, barking that beastmen would never bow down as slaves. Stepping up, Tai bluntly told him he wasn't even worth the trouble of a duel. Just as a pair of knights stepped forward to cuff him, the beastman suddenly threw a low blow out of nowhere. Yet my system-summoned guards proved to be just as massive and heavy-hitting as these brutes, with one of them catching his wrist right in mid-swing to stop that stone hammer dead in its tracks, leaving the bewildered beastman shook before they tied him up tight and dragged him off. Whereupon I ordered Tai to sweat the truth out of him using whatever means necessary, since I was dying to figure out why these creatures showed up. What the actual vibe was at the Allied defense line, and everything going down on the beastman's side of the border. Elena piped up, asking if they had merely dropped by to loot, but I shook my head, noting that if plunder was their goal, they wouldn't have sent a mere crew of 10 to spend all day pacing around our outer walls, checking out our defenses like low-key scouts sizing up the joint, meaning something way heavier was on the horizon. So I told Elena she didn't need to stress, arguing that if the Allied line happened to ghost us, we'd simply stop depending on them altogether, seeing how throughout history, relying on others always blew up in your face, and the only real ride or die you could trust was your own hustle, which left her looking totally lost at that mindset, though I didn't bother breaking it down any further. as the fortress in Twin Tower City stood magnificently tall, looking way more impressive than the fancy royal pad back in the capital. Low-key unflashy yet radiating absolute authority, giving me a solid night's sleep before the next morning, when my opening move was dropping 3 heavy-duty knights, marking another massive stroke of beginner's luck as my mounted squad expanded at light speed, prompting me to double-check the talent timer next, which showed 6 more sleeps until the next specialist unlocked. Just as Tai walked up, chill, Tai, bearing the juicy intel straight from the interrogation room, which made me snatch the written confession to my study and devour every line, finding the leaked details utterly wild, starting with the fact that the Beastmen tribes had been low-key stalking human lands for years and were completely overweighting around, meaning they weren't just testing Twin Tower City's waters, but were mapping out defensive layouts across multiple kingdoms all at the exact same time, as they geared up for a massive, all-out total war against humanity. Number 2, after years of relative peace, the Allied defense line had grown super lax and totally lost its edge. Looking to cash in on that vulnerability, the Beastmen plotted a sudden, well-coordinated raid that completely blindsided the human forces. Thirdly, a major point was that the Beastmen tribes were totally divided, since rival clans constantly scrapped over territory and resources originating from a minor tribe. The captured Beastmen proved that not every clan possessed equal military might or shared the same enthusiasm for the upcoming war. Fourth, and this was the absolute game-changer, within the next 48 hours, 500 Beastmen warriors were set to breach the defense line and launch a direct blitz against Twin Tower City. Their game plan was to seize the city first, pivot around, and blindside the Allied defense line from behind to trigger a devastating 2-pronged assault capable of crushing the entire western border. Tai insisted, with a wave of his hand, that I honestly had zero reason to sweat it, claiming 500 Beastmen were total light work, since his elite knights could easily smoke them. While I agreed, my mind was way beyond mere defense as I recalled what Zio had previously filled me in on regarding the Allied envoy rolling into town in 2 days. To collect our monthly tribute of grain and gold, the timing honestly couldn't have been more clutch. If those 500 Beastmen struck right then, the envoy would witness firsthand their precious defense line completely implode and see my forces securing the border instead of theirs, which was huge, giving me massive leverage to renegotiate terms, or straight up ghost those monthly payments. Why on earth should I fund an army utterly incapable of stopping a mere 500 raiders? This was way more than just a skirmish. It was the ultimate golden opportunity to finally liberate Twin Tower City from the Alliance's financial chokehold for good. Calling Tai over, I immediately started mapping out a strategy that demanded absolute, flawless execution. The Beastmen had to show up right on cue. The Allied envoy needed to witness precisely the right narrative, and my troops had to pull off a victory so undeniably epic that nobody could ever doubt Twin Tower City's capacity to stand on its own, leaning in close. I began breaking down the battle plan for Tai step by step. As day 3 began right on schedule, the Allied envoy pulled up at Twin Tower City. Like clockwork, Tai happened to be pulling gate duty today. Naturally, I had already given him a heads-up with specific orders. As that whole envoy crew rolled up, Tai straight up demanded they ID themselves before stepping foot inside. Total rage took over the lead knight instantly. Yelling at the top of his lungs, he claimed everyone should already know who he was and demanded that Trenton show his face right then and there. Without missing a beat, Tai dropped the truth bomb that Trenton was 6 feet under and couldn't come out. If they refused to properly show their IDs, they could just pack up and bounce. Otherwise, they were getting iced right on the spot. Snickering at Tai's bold attitude, the knight's soldiers thought it was a joke. Mocking him openly, they bragged that their commander, Charles, would make him pay big time for such disrespect once they finally got past the gates. Throwing out major threats, one of the attendants even chimed in that if Charles got triggered, the Allied army would instantly bail from their sector of the defense line, abandoning Twin Tower City and leaving the entire Lane Kingdom totally exposed to the Beastmen. Not even flinching, Tai calmly reiterated his demand to see their credentials. Boiling with rage, Charles realized he was totally out of options. Getting inside was the only way he could pull off his mission. Declaring his identity as Knight Charles, he announced he was the envoy of the 9th Defense Line, here to scoop up the Alliance's military provisions. Per their agreement, he commanded that the heavy gates be swung wide open. Giving the documents a thorough look, Tai verified they were totally legit and finally waved them through. Sporting an icy glare, Charles marched right inside. Having no clue who Tai actually was, he demanded to know where Trenton was hiding. Once again, Tai informed him that Trenton had kicked the bucket. Throwing him for a loop, The news didn't really bother Charles all that much in the end. Whether dead or alive, all he cared about was getting his hands on that grain and gold. They escorted him straight to me at the castle. Stepping up, Tai introduced me as Count Zhuanghua, the brand new lord of Twin Tower City. Caught completely off guard by the regime change, Charles flicked his gaze toward Alice standing right behind me, suddenly noticing her armor looked awfully like temple night gear, which instantly put him on high alert before he offered a formal greeting. Flashing a friendly smile, I reassured him that all the provisions were already packed and ready to go. He was free to haul them out whenever he felt like it. Sensing no danger, Charles visibly let his guard down. As long as the grain was secured, everything else was basically minor. He assured me straight up that the Allied forces would keep those beastmen behind the defense line, leaving us to just focus on farming and production. I told him I believed him completely. He seemed low-key pleased by my cooperative attitude. Then he brought up Talia's behavior at the gate, claiming my knight commander had been super rude and nearly caused a massive misunderstanding. He suggested that if they'd actually left because of the insult, Twin Tower City would have been totally defenseless against any beast man attack. I played along flawlessly, immediately ordering my men to arrest Tai E and throw him in the dungeon for being disrespectful. I told Charles that Twin Tower City stood firmly with the Alliance. Charles was stoked. He'd expected some serious push back from the new lord, but I was turning out to be a total pushover, just like Trenton had been in his mind. Everyone on this side of the defense line had to bow to the Alliance, and I was no different. Right on schedule, Volume 50 came rushing into the room in a total panic. He reported that hundreds of green-skinned beast men had appeared outside the city walls, with at least 500 of them spreading across the horizon. He asked what we should do. I jumped to my feet and grabbed Charles by the hand, putting on my most desperate expression while begging him to save us. I told him the beast men were here, and only he could protect Twin Tower City. I promised to double the provisions, delivering 2 full shipments instead of 1, if he would just fight them off. I was practically shaking with gratitude and fear, clinging to him like he was our absolute last hope. Charles told me to calm down, yet I could see the panic spreading across his own face. He tried to hide it, but his eyes totally gave him away. His defense line hadn't seen real combat in years. The occasional lone beast man wandering too close was one thing, but 500 warriors was a full-on wartime assault. He had zero idea why this was happening now, and desperately tried to think fast. He instructed me to dispatch my troops right up to the barricades so we could set up defenses while he cooked up a strategy. Volume 50 then stepped up to drop the brutal truth that every single defender had already ditched their posts out of pure panic the second they laid eyes on the beastman horde, leaving the ramparts completely deserted, and Charles instantly froze up. As all the blood drained right out of his face, I locked my gaze onto him with massive, hopeful eyes, desperately waiting for some kind of epic, heroic move, only to realize there was zero chance he could actually pull it off, because if he and his tiny squad actually tried to throw hands, they would get utterly crushed under those massive war hammers in seconds, and he knew it, his crew knew it, proving that the Alliance's legendary clout meant jack squat the moment real danger pulled up. After a brief pause to collect his thoughts, he told me to chill out, swearing he would personally march his boys straight out front to engage the enemy head-on, while simultaneously firing off swift messengers racing back toward the main defense line for backup. Completely flooded with relief, I gushed, claiming I always knew the Alliance would never leave us hanging because Twin Tower City was depending entirely on him. Charles bolted outside where his own soldiers were already caught in a full-blown panic attack, having just caught sight of the Beastman army. A dense green tide of brutal warriors sprawling across the entire plain, prompting one of them to blurt out if they were actually expected to bleed for Twin Tower City with sheer terror, plastered all over their faces. Since these guys hadn't signed up for any real frontline combat, seeing as they were basically just glorified tax collectors. The second Charles was out of my sight, he dropped the act completely and straight up told his squad they weren't fighting a damn soul, instead planning to slip out through a hidden side gate, keep as far away from the monsters as humanly possible, and sprint like hell back toward the main defense line when somebody nervously brought up Twin Tower City. Charles sneered, arguing the place was basically toast anyway, leaving them with zero options to save it, while prioritizing their own survival above all else, under the excuse that hauling intel back to the Alliance was way more vital, because staying meant certain death, which his men eagerly agreed with as they scrambled wildly for the side exit. And the very moment Charles stepped outside and caught a horrifying glimpse of the Beastman army in the distance, he broke into an absolute mad dash. Up on the ramparts high above him, I suddenly showed up. His retreating figure was locked in my gaze, shrinking lower and lower, as he bolted for his life, leaving us ghosted without a second thought. cupping my hands around my mouth. I hollered after him with every single ounce of breath in my lungs. I demanded to know if he was really dipping on us. Was the Alliance genuinely bailing on Twin Towers City? My voice ricocheted across the open, desolate ground. Charles never once glanced back. He just kept sprinting. Every single soldier tagging along kept running too. The so-called brave protectors of the Allied defense line, that mighty force that flexed hard for tribute from every kingdom bordering our lands now, they were literally fleeing the exact threat. They were paid to crush. A smirk crossed my face, because every single person on those walls had just witnessed the raw, unfiltered truth. The Alliance drained our grain, milked our gold, and the second real danger pulled up they scattered like rats. This outcome was Loki exactly what I needed everyone to witness. From this exact second onward, not a single soul in Twin Tower City would ever question why I refused to keep funding a bunch of cowards who refused to throw hands. Now it was time for the main event. 500 beastmen were marching straight toward my city, and I had zero intention of backing down. Charles picked up the pace, even more the moment my voice echoed at his back. His pathetic little silhouette was tracked by my eyes shrinking into the horizon until Ty stepped up and confirmed he was totally gone. Good. Every bystander on those stone walls had just witnessed the Alliance's true, cowardly colors. They swiped our food, pocketed our cash, and bylaid at the very hint of actual danger. Now our full focus shifted to handling the real threat. Tai was questioned by me regarding our battle readiness. All defensive gear was fully locked and loaded, while the civilians stranded outside the walls had already been secured safely. I made it crystal clear to him that this clash needed to be a sweep. Every last beastman had to be permanently neutralized right here. With zero survivors escaping to run their mouths back home, Tai swore on his life he'd bring back their heads or forfeit his own. Scrambling up to the highest point of the castle keep, I watched the oncoming beastman army approach, massive and heavily built. As they were, a critical detail suddenly caught my eye. They rocked up wearing practically zero armor, sporting nothing more than sketchy leather straps and beast hides matched against my fully kitted out knights. That power gap was gonna be totally brutal. And honestly, I had zero plans to meet them out in the open anyway. I was sitting pretty behind thick stone walls with solid defenses locked in and a garrison ready for action. Why would I throw away an unfair advantage like that? Charging straight toward the ramparts came the beastmen, acting like a total W was already in the bag. They probably had their reasons, though given how things usually went down when they rolled up on human villages, most defenders would either bail immediately or put up a pathetic token fight before folding like cheap lawn chairs. They'd literally never run into a city that was actually locked and loaded and ready to throw down. He skipped any fancy speeches completely the second those beastmen crossed into striking distance. The signal was dropped. A lethal storm of arrows poured down from the battlement's heavy boulders, smashed right into the rushing mob. Even boiling sludge got dumped off the wall edges onto anyone brave or dumb enough to get close. The beastmen started dropping like flies long before they even touched the base of the fortifications. By the time the few survivors slammed against the cold stone, the casualty count was already mind-blowing. Storming a heavily fortified city has pretty much always been the absolute messiest kind of warfare. These beastmen brought raw muscle to the table, but zero siege gear, zero tactics, and zero backup plans, and absolutely zero clue how to crack a defended stronghold. They were literally just throwing bodies at a brick wall and praying it would somehow shatter. Watching over half his squad get wiped out in seconds, their chief finally sounded the retreat, but I had a counterplay ready for that too. The exact microsecond they turned tail to run, the massive city gates blew wide open. Then he stepped up and spearheaded the counterattack, personally rolling out not with basic grunts, but with a full squad of 20 elite knights. 15 heavy cavalry units spawned straight from my system, backed up by the original 5 Twin Towers veterans, all of them saddled up on massive war horses, suited up in full plate. And swinging heavy-duty gear, they slammed into the retreating beastmen like a sledgehammer crashing right through glass. Right next to me on the ramparts stood Lena, her jaw dropping, as 20 elite riders completely shredded what was left of the beastmen. Forces, the mere thought of humans pulling this off on beastmen blew her mind. I broke down the cold math for her. My knights were deadass, just as massive and jacked as any beastman, plus they were strapped in full-plate armor riding battle-hardened warhorses. With top-tier gear, fully armored troops versus unarmored foes was a total flex. It only took a couple of devastating cavalry charges before the entire beastman army was utterly fried. Tai personally dragged their boss in alive and threw him right in front of me in chains. I offered the chieftain a clean shot at life if he spilled the beans. He straight up spat at me, roaring that beastmen would never bow down as slaves. I just shrugged and had the guards drag him off to a cell. I told them I'd deal with his interrogation first thing tomorrow. My main goal was purely intel on those beastmen encampments, sitting tight, near the ninth defense line down in the cold gloom of the dungeon the chieftain, whose tag turned out to be Nuz, discovered that the beastman scout we locked up days ago was chilling in the very next cell over. Nuz flipped out upon realizing his own tribesman was still breathing, and instantly slammed him for selling out their crew. The terrified scout tried to defend himself, arguing these humans hit completely differently than the grunts on the field. Their vibe was terrifyingly overpowered, and slipping away was literally impossible. He softly suggested that Ness should just cooperate, hinting it might be their only ticket out of this alive. Ness went ballistic, hammering against the iron bars and screaming bloody murder about beastmen. Pride the scout let out a heavy sigh and muttered that if Ness refused to play ball, he was never walking out of that dungeon alive. I totally left them to hash that out on their own. My attention was hooked by something way more hype. A glowing notification had just popped on my system panel. The exact one I'd been waiting for. The system hyped me up for conquering my very first foreign race, and started unboxing a sweet reward, some gear called an elite infantry regiment. My heart skipped a beat right before that all too familiar glitchy static buzzed. System error correction currently in progress. I mentally prepared myself for total disappointment, honestly expecting the worst. Naturally, the system always picked the most clutch moments to utterly glitch out. Following a few painfully tense seconds of absolute silence, the glitch finally cleared up and the infantry regiment completely vanished. Stepping right into their place were two totally different rewards: a rare military talisman alongside an intermediate witch magic compendium. That military talisman was an absolute game changer, seriously. Once it got activated, it would instantly summon 500 elite heavy infantry soldiers to fight right by my side for a solid 24 hours. They shared a striking resemblance to my heavy knights, except they operated strictly on foot, fully equipped with horse-cutting sabers and sturdy iron shields. Every single use required a full 7-day cooldown to recharge. Having 500 disciplined heavy infantry units suddenly drop out of thin air was enough to completely flip any war zone. When paired up with my steadily expanding cavalry force, this gave me the firepower to deploy a legit, serious army whenever I wanted. Meanwhile, the second reward brought a totally different kind of value, proving just as useful. The intermediate witch magic compendium essentially acted like an instant power-up hack. It possessed the ability to transform any ordinary witch into a mid-level practitioner overnight, granting them full access to intermediate-level spells. I beckoned Alina over to me, casual as can be, as I brought up the witch ranking system. With a calm demeanor, she explained how witches progressed across several distinct stages: newly awakened, beginner, intermediate, advanced, and finally legendary. She noted that she was still stuck at the beginner level, only capable of handling basic healing and rudimentary binding spells. An intermediate witch, however, operated on a completely different tier of power, unlocking devastating elemental magic alongside various other supernatural perks. Even so, she solemnly warned that untrained witches could become major hazards, pointing out that an uncontrolled witch carried just as much destructive potential as a full-blown demon. A knowing smile crossed my face as I looked right at Alina before dropping the question. Did she want to level up into an intermediate witch? Her eyes flew wide open in sheer shock. While she had zero clue what I was about to hand over to her, just the sheer possibility of it was enough to leave her utterly speechless. Time and time again under the cover of night, this incredible girl had saved my skin with her healing magic, keeping my horses safe from any shady sabotage, shielding my crew from nasty media manipulation, and rolling deep with me through every single throwdown ever since the day we first crossed paths. If anyone Loki deserved this major glow-up, it was totally her. And wielding intermediate-level magic meant she wouldn't just be my basic healer anymore. She was about to evolve into an absolute powerhouse, a total beast who could roll with my elite knights and throw hands against vicious demon women, ferocious beast men. Or whatever crazy nonsense this world threw at us. The glitchy system had acted up once again, tanking me an entire infantry regiment in the process. Yet what it handed me instead was bound to pay off way harder down the road. A one-off temporary army was pretty fire, but having a permanently buffed Alina was a total game-changer that would keep bringing massive wins day in and day out. Twin Tower City was officially mine, as the beast men got utterly wrecked. The phony alliance stood totally exposed as frauds, and my army kept gaining serious momentum as time marched relentlessly forward. The true domination era was only just getting started. Alina tried to play it super chill about her new upgrade, insisting she didn't need any special handouts, and that simply sticking by my side as a loyal follower was enough. I immediately told her to stop being so ridiculous, and without wasting a single second, applied the intermediate magic compendium right onto her. The exact moment my hands brushed against her, her spiritual aura erupted with raw, dazzling energy, A massive flood of spellcraft knowledge rushed straight into her brain, filling her with the absolute certainty that casting them would be totally effortless as she stared at me wide-eyed, even for someone born as a natural witch. Reaching that intermediate milestone usually demanded years of grueling study and constant practice. Yet I had skipped all that with a single touch smiles, breaking out as I told her not to trip over it. Because if she kept leveling up at this rate, one day she might easily become the baddest witch on the planet. I gave her my word that eventually I was going to make the entire world realize that witches weren't dangerous monsters at all, they were guardian angels who actually saved people. Her sweet eyes instantly welled up with tears, prompting me to tease that I hated seeing girls cry, especially the absolute ride or die. I trusted the most her face lit up like a beacon at those words, seeing how I had just called her my most important person, now standing as the ultimate go-to. She practically radiated pure good vibes, strutting away to patch up any troops banged up in the skirmish. With that whole beastman menace locked down for the moment, my sights were set straight toward the sunset. A crew of 500 beastmen punching through the barrier meant that front line had major red flags. First-hand observation of the whole mess was a must for me while weighing whether those beastmen lands further out were worth sweeping through. Tracking down Zio High let me drop some new directives. Our forces would ride west for a tactical recon, with potential expansion in mind, keeping Twin Tower City locked down. And leveling up was going to be entirely his game while I was out. He locked it in without dropping a single question, zero hesitation, and zero need for extra clarification. Just a totally low-key, rock-solid nod. That right there is what peak talent looks like. Someone totally locked into the assignment and executing smoothly without requiring any hand-holding, yet stepping foot into Beastman turf meant some solid intel was required first. That captured Beastman boss would come in clutch if he could be made to spill. Plus, I wanted a crystal-clear look at how that allied defense line was actually holding up right up close. Meanwhile, Charles, along with his squad, had sprinted non-stop all the way back to their section of the wall once safety finally hit them. Heavy chest breaths and totally shaken nerves took over. His troops couldn't wrap their heads around why 500 beastmen suddenly popped out of nowhere. Following years of total quiet, Charles threw out a guess that a minor rogue tribe was freelancing. But either way, harvesting grain wasn't happening today. Dropping back at his fortress, Charles dropped the report to his higher-up, the Knight Commander, holding down the 9th defense line. He spilled the news about the beast men hitting Twin Tower City, while claiming that city was basically a total loss. The Knight Commander totally brushed it off, stating their mission was guarding the stone walls, instead of saving towns sitting behind them, as long as those beastmen stayed away from the defense line itself. Anything past the wall wasn't their headache. With Lane Kingdom's grain payments completely cut off, he considered any loyalty to that kingdom thoroughly cancelled. But Charles was hit with a harsh demand by the Knight Commander concerning the missing grain shipment that needed replacement somehow, leaving Charles completely shook to his core. The daunting question lingered in his mind of how he could possibly pull thousands of pounds of grain right out of thin air, though the Knight Commander gave zero flips and simply brushed him off. Suddenly, a scout came sprinting in bearing wild news out of nowhere. Twin Tower City had somehow pulled through and survived, after the beast men had totally taken an L, leaving their forces vanished into thin air without a trace. Hit by sudden shock, Charles weighed the option of heading back to grab the grain before his massive ego completely stopped him in his tracks. Since he had ghosted everyone and fled that very morning, making a comeback on the same day would be major cringe beyond all imagination. Plus, who knew if those beast men were still low-key lurking close by? Choosing to stand his ground right there, he figured he would solve the grain dilemma through some other hustle. Putting my master plan into motion the very next day, I rode toward the 9th defense line alongside Thai Air, bringing 5,000 pounds of grain as the ultimate bait. Upon our arrival, Charles was spotted waiting outside the fortress gates wearing my most stressed-out poker face. I approached him to claim that Twin Tower City had been utterly fried by the brutal beastman assault, adding that the beastmen were still lurking somewhere deep inside our territory. I acted completely terrified, dropping off some grain as a down payment while begging the Alliance to send reinforcement troops to help hunt them down, which completely blindsided Charles. He had totally expected me to roll up super mad about his cowardly ghosting. Yet here I was acting super low-key and asking for his assistance instead, thoroughly confused by this twist. He let his guard completely down and confessed he was merely a low-level envoy lacking the authority to deploy any troops. Though he offered to present the plea to his Knight Commander II, he spun around to deliver his request. Thai Air was immediately sent out by me to scout the entire fortress. Because a system-trained, elite knight could easily map out hostile troop positions, fortification weak spots, supply caches, and garrison power way faster than any professional spy long before Charles made his way back. Every single secret of this place would be unlocked for me. After listening to everything Charles had to say, the Knight Commander instantly shot down the thought of offering help, arguing that out there on the open battlefield, far away from the protection of their fortress walls, those beastmen would have totally wiped out his troops in no time. Survival was only possible because those heavy stone barricades shielded them completely, marching straight into Twin Tower City. For combat would be pure suicide. Charles questioned what their next move ought to be, keeping in mind that the 9th Defense Line was tasked specifically with keeping the Lane Kingdom sector safe, and sound their supposed savior had literally showed up right at their front door, crying out for assistance. An ice-cold vibe came straight from the Knight Commander's reply. He instructed them to take the grain delivery, fake a promise to help out, and just sit tight. Once those beastmen finished leveling Twin Tower City and wiping everyone out over there, there wouldn't be a single soul left to point fingers. Problem solved. No more annoying pleas for backup to deal with, plus a massive stash of free grain to sweeten it. Charles was low-key shook by how ice-cold that plan was, yet he totally saw the twisted logic behind it. It got a messy situation completely off their hands, sidestepped any actual bloodshed on the battlefield, and handed them 5 grand pounds of free food for free. He hurried back to drop the good news right into my lap. My face was still locked in that terrified yet super grateful expression when Charles stepped back inside to announce that the Knight Commander had finally agreed to pitch in. I thanked him over and over again, playing it up like he had literally just pulled me from the jaws of death deep down inside. I was barely keeping a straight face from laughing. These Alliance fighters were turning out exactly how I had predicted, just total cowards, hiding behind thick concrete, pocketing heavy taxes from territories. They never had any real intention of defending anyway. Their high-end mighty commander had just signed off on letting an entire city get slaughtered just to avoid doing paperwork. Tyre had already wrapped up his scouting run, completely giving me the exact headcount of their deployed forces, where every single squad was stationed, and how laughably weak their actual combat abilities were. That massive fortress was basically a total paper tiger, boasting flashy outer walls, guarding a bunch of grunts who couldn't fight their way out of a wet paper bag, right at the exact second Charles finished, telling me that the Alliance was going to back us up. Blood-curdling screams pierced the air from the defense line ramparts. Loud emergency horns echoed across the fortress grounds. Panic-stricken soldiers bolted frantically in every direction, their skin completely drained of color from sheer terror. A frantic voice could be heard yelling at the very top of its lungs high up in the watchtower. The defense line was getting completely swarmed by beastmen. Scanning the absolute madness unfolding all around me, I felt nothing but low-key satisfaction. Everything was finally falling right into place. The Alliance was about to realize that their sweet setup of hoarding grain for years, dodging actual combat, and leaving border cities to rot was officially cooked, whether they knew it yet or not. The power dynamic across this whole frontier had already flipped to my side. The balance of power on this frontier had already shifted, and it had totally shifted to me. Charles caught one glimpse of the beastmen storming the front lines, and ghosted without saying a word to me. He dipped straight into the fortress. Soldiers showed up on the ramparts a few moments later, though hardly any knights were among them. Charles and his sketchy Knight Commander were nowhere to be found when Tyre asked what our next move was. I told him to hold tight. The 9th Defense Line simply couldn't be allowed to fall to the beastmen. Such a loss would rob me of a vital staging ground for any upcoming campaigns into beastman territory. That fortress would otherwise turn into a major roadblock against my grand expansion plans. Still, I wanted to see how the defenders held their ground before committing my own forces. Tyre pointed out that we only had 20 guys with us. I assured them I had everything handled. Tracking down Charles and the Knight Commander was priority number 1. A thorough search through the fortress revealed it was totally empty. Then Tyre spotted a pack of roughly 50 riders booking it away from the back exit. They were heading north at maximum speed. The Knight Commander, Charles, and every single knight had abandoned the fortress and their own troops without a second thought. Tyre was furious, and understandably so as a soldier himself. The sheer cowardice of officers ditching their men right in the middle of a fight was completely unforgivable, though I didn't waste any energy getting mad. My focus shifted straight to the walls instead. Things were deteriorating at a scary pace. With no knights around to lead the defense, the regular soldiers were cracking under pressure. Beastmen were already scaling the defensive walls. These defenders sure had guts, yet heavy firepower was totally missing from their arsenal, which they desperately needed to repel foes twice their size. Seeing those stone hammers flying, I made up my mind instantly. Without missing a beat, that military talisman was activated by me. A squad of 500 elite heavy infantry suddenly spawned across the open ground, just behind the ramparts clutching heavy iron shields and horse-cutting sabers. They meant serious business radiating pure lethal energy. Not a single word escaped their lips. They didn't even have to talk trash Thai air, was immediately instructed by me to march them up the walls. Not a single beast man was allowed to walk away alive. That stressed-out look on Tyr's face flipped into a massive grin the second those 500 reinforcements came into view with them right at his heels. He charged headfirst up the wall. The impact was instantaneous upon spotting 500 heavily armored troops, flooding the battlements. The collapsing defenders caught a second wind, their morale skyrocketed right back up, backing up Tyre. They mounted a vicious counterattack. The beastmen got completely blindsided by the sudden shift their intelligence network had promised them. This fortress was completely understaffed and weak. An absolute walk in the park was what they had anticipated instead. They walked right into a buzzsaw composed of an impenetrable wall of iron and steel mowing them down with zero hesitation. Roughly 2 hours ticked away as the battle raged on fighting tooth and nail. The beastmen were totally outmatched, holding the line like an unbreakable wall. My heavy infantry locked it down while the original garrison troops fought side by side with them, fueled by a fierce, renewed determination eventually. The beastmen lines cracked and they hit full retreat, leaving over 500 corpses scattered across the bloody ramparts for pulling off that epic W. The system paid out. It started cooking up something called a legendary general recruitment card. Hearing those words made my stomach do a happy flip. A legendary general would totally smoke any of my current knights in terms of power. Then came that annoying, dreaded static sound system error correction initiated. Vanishing into thin air, the legendary general card was gone and swapped out for something titled Riding Mastery. A deep sigh slipped past my lips. The system was notorious for always nerfing the best drops. Still, Riding Mastery wasn't a total L. A massive physical buff coursed through my veins. Instantly. If someone tossed me onto a warhorse, right this second handling combat and maneuvers would be a breeze, even though I'd grinded like crazy all my life. Honestly, I still lacked the pure physical muscle for a real brawl. Yet, factoring in future system loot drops, maybe one day I'd actually ride out into the thick of it myself. With the final count confirming 532 beastmen wiped out, I stepped outside to address the remaining garrison. These poor guys had just been straight-up ghosted by every single commanding officer they answered to. Their knights had bylaid and left them to get slaughtered, and I didn't sugarcoat it. I told them straight up they were treated like trash by the very higher-ups meant to protect them. Right after that, I laid down my terms. As Zhuang Hua, the actual lord of Twin Tower City, I was officially taking over the 9th defense line starting today. Anyone who chose to stay and roll with my crew would be taken care of, while anyone wanting out could grab 10 pounds of grain for travel cash and head wherever they wanted. No hard feelings at all, because these soldiers were far from cowards. They had held those very walls against beastmen in brutal melee, while their cowardly commanders ran for the hills. To me, that kind of grit was way more valuable than any fancy title or high-tier armor set. I respected the hell out of them and wanted them to know it. One by one, they hit the dirt on bended knee, all 530 soldiers swearing total loyalty to me right there. Not that they had much choice anyway. If Allied command ever caught wind of the fortress falling, they'd be executed as deserters regardless of the facts. Still, beyond just saving their own skins, they had actually witnessed my reinforcements in action, and those 500 heavy infantry troops had looked like absolute legends. If sticking with me meant eventually becoming fierce warriors like them, these guys were totally down for it. I had Tyre get the new recruits organized while I went to inspect the fortress. My system interface popped up with an update, showing the 9th defense line now officially listed as my second territory right beside Twin Tower City. My prosperity score had jumped up to 130. There was still zero clue as to which exact threshold would unlock new features, but hey, progress is progress. Even so, something was still bugging me. Just how on earth did those initial 500 beastmen manage to pull off yesterday's raid on Twin Tower City? How on earth they managed to breeze past this defense line to begin with while the garrison stood its ground, and the wall looked totally solid even though leadership was pretty low-key trash. Troops were still stationed there. Since beastmen definitely lack wings to fly over, there must have been a hidden breach somewhere or someone low-key. Let them waltz right through on purpose. I dispatched Tyrell to grill the fresh recruits about any suspicious activity or security gaps that they might have accidentally laid eyes on. This mess was a serious security risk that low-key put my whole territory in jeopardy, so it totally demanded answers right away. I cast my gaze northward, toward the 8th defense line under the dim daylight, where Charles and his fleeing knight commander had retreated, wondering if they'd ever dare show their faces back here, though honestly, probably not anytime soon as things turned out. That runaway knight commander, whose actual name was Leon, was already busy schooling his squad on how to cover up their total cowardice. Cooked up a plan to lie to their superior commander Bruce, claiming that an overwhelming swarm of beast men had ambushed them, forcing a retreat against their will after putting up a fierce fight. Except there was a glaring flaw in that story. Not a single one of them had even a scratch. Their gear was spotless, and their blades looked brand new, giving off the vibe of a weekend picnic, rather than a brutal war zone. Leon's makeshift solution was disturbingly ruthless. Drawing his gleaming sword right there, he instructed everyone that they needed to inflict fake wounds on each other, slashing arms and cutting legs to manufacture some visible injuries, and then drop some gear along the trail to sell the illusion of a desperate tactical retreat. Charles nervously muttered, asking if it would actually hurt, while Leon shot him a cold glare and asked whether he feared a little physical pain or a gruesome death. These were the absolute jokes of soldiers the Allied nations had foolishly trusted to guard their borders. Petty officers who ditched the battlefield left their subordinates hanging and then hacked at each other with steel blades just to fake battle scars. The whole defensive framework was rotten to the core with corruption and cowardice. I felt zero remorse about seizing the 9th defense line for myself, since those frauds clearly didn't deserve it. My own troops, the ones who actually bled for it, did instead, and from this moment forward, this entire section of the border was under my dominion. Any beast man daring to cross my path would have to deal with actual killers instead of cosplay soldiers in shiny uniforms, whose only real talent was shaking down kingdoms. They would never lift a finger to protect Tyre. Came back to drop the intel on how the beast men managed to slip past our defensive line. The massive wall itself was built like a tank, making stealthy infiltration practically impossible. Yet a single flaw existed. Tucked away on the eastern edge of the 9th defense line, where a jagged cliff hid a dangerously narrow fissure slim enough to let barely one soul squeeze through at a time. The real kicker about that specific night was Commander Leon giving explicit orders to keep all his troops far away from that zone. It was a strict mandatory mandate, not a casual request when a high-stakes fortress leaves a gaping weak spot, and the boss man strictly bans anyone from going near it. That pretty much spelled out the whole truth for me. Leon was either willingly letting the beastmen through, or he had some shady side deal running hot with whatever forces lurked on the flip side. The exact motive didn't even matter at this exact moment. Tyrell was dispatched with a squad of troops to check out that breach and weld it shut permanently. Case closed, while my mind zoomed in on the big picture. Securing absolute control over the 9th defense line handed me a god-tier tactical advantage, allowing me to push deep into beastman territory whenever I felt like it, while my backup Twin Tower city stayed cozy and protected behind the wall. Provided the human alliance decided to mind their own business, I could slowly swallow up Beastman lands whole and scale up my empire while my system evolved right along with it, giving me enough juice eventually to expand operations across the entire stretch of the wall and annex competing territories and sovereign kingdoms. Strolling through the dimly lit fortress halls, something weird about the floor tiles caught my eye, prompting me to ask what lay hidden beneath. The guards nervously explained it was a restricted subterranean zone, reserved strictly as Leon's private sanctuary, where only his most trusted inner circle knights could tread. Breaking that door open was my immediate command, continuing a long tradition of cracking locked basements. Ever since I first dropped into this crazy world, pure nightmares or insane riches could be locked inside. This particular vault, Loki, ended up being famously tidy and meticulously sorted. Heavy grain sacks, alongside towering stacks of gold coins, completely took over one side. Generations of surplus built strictly from tribute money, while they literally never threw a single punch. It totally added up. 0 wars, next to no expenses, yet fat monthly payouts rolling in straight from Lane Kingdom. Hoarding cash was definitely their vibe all along. Though a specific display rack totally grabbed my attention. Over on the far wall, weird relics rested on the shelves, things bearing a wild resemblance to drums, ceremonial bowls, and other bizarre apparatuses. Shriveled specimens of unidentifiable creatures occupied a few other shelves until Elena stepped up right next to me and started naming them off point blank. Magical gear utilized strictly by demon women made up those items, not standard staves, but alternative instruments meant to seriously amp up different spellcasting styles. Each individual piece held its own distinct purpose. Those preserved specimens were simply remains of mystical beasts. I was low-key shook by how much she low-key knew regarding demon woman gear, keeping in mind she grew up as an ordinary country kid. She broke it down, explaining that ever since I leveled her up to the intermediate tier, an absolute data dump of information flooding her brain had brought massive comprehension concerning demon women, along with their equipment. Her capability to wield any of this gear personally was questioned by me. causing her to instantly shake her head, since human magic and demon woman power originated from completely opposing energy sources. Those artifacts were entirely useless to her. All of it got vacuumed straight into my inventory space regardless. They might seriously pay off down the road perhaps for bartering, research, or if a demon woman ever joined my squad. The actual riddle remained why a human alliance stronghold stashed a bunch of demon woman relics deep down in its basement. Not a single demon woman had been run into around here by me. Leon's shady secrets ran way deeper than mere corruption, though untangling every single one. Tonight wasn't happening for me dead tired and starving to death, were my exact conditions. Scurrying off to cook dinner was handled swiftly by Alina these days, whenever she wasn't patching up injured troopers instead of healing injured locals. My personal needs were her main focus all day, whipping up 3 solid meals, keeping my room spotless, and catering to my every little whim. She gave off total caretaker vibes rather than looking like an overpowered witch. I appreciated it way more than I let on. That night, as I laid back in bed, a crimson glow suddenly painted my bedroom window, radiating straight from the beastman lands past the border wall. Bolting upright, I demanded to know if we were getting ambushed. Standing post by the entry like always, Alice assured me no beastmen crossed over, though she sensed weird magical spikes originating from that exact zone. Magic signatures deep in beastman territory. That definitely pointed to active demon ladies out there. The flames and the spellcasting were obviously linked. Could be some weird ritual or a turf war between rival clans. Either way, it wasn't an immediate threat to us, instructing Alice to rouse me if foes showed up. I drifted back to sleep until morning light brought an insane system drop my way. Pulling for my daily nights, I unexpectedly scored 5 heavy cavalry units at once. Pulling 5 in one go was my highest roll yet. Evidently, the system's reward cap was still scaling up. My mounted division was shaping into an actual army. Yesterday's talisman soldiers had already vanished, needing a solid week to recharge as expected, but my permanent roster kept expanding. Since the night passed without incident, I headed out to run my morning rounds. The defense grid was already operating way smoother than it ever did under Leon. Tyre's men were spearheading the patrols, and our newly drafted guards carried out their watch duties with genuine discipline and focus. It's wild what proper leadership can actually achieve. I questioned Tyre about the cliff opening, and he reported 0 beastmen spotted over there, though something totally unexpected popped up instead. A wanderer had slipped through from the flip side, turning out to be a severely beaten human woman who was barely hanging on when discovered and completely unable to speak. Her whole body was totally laced with intersecting whip marks. Around 20 years of age was her apparent age while clad in absolute tattered rags. Bringing Alina along, I immediately rushed down to check on her even for me. Witnessing that scene was straight-up heartbreaking. Deep lash injuries were blanketed across her skin, with some being old and heavily scarred over while others remained fresh and continuously bleeding. No matter what she had been put through, it was clearly a prolonged and brutal ordeal. Waves of deep pity instantly welled up in Alina's eyes. She asked if healing the stranger was a good idea. Before any words could leave my mouth, Alice softly chimed in from right behind my position. She pointed out that low-key magical energy pulsed inside the woman's body. It was super faint, but definitely, there nonetheless such a sign meant she was a demon woman for real. Alina hesitated for a second while casting an uncertain glance at me. A demon woman straight out of beastman territory, having crawled through a hidden gap in the defense line, while beaten nearly to an inch of her life. The safest play would have been to leave her be or maybe run a strict interrogation. First, I went ahead and instructed Alina to heal her anyway. Just because someone happened to be a demon woman didn't automatically make them evil. Leaving a person to flat-out die right in front of us, based purely on assumptions, was out of the question. Alina gave a firm nod and immediately started channeling her upgraded healing magic. The massive leap from her old intermediate level was night and day. She barely needed to chant a single phrase, and the recovery process worked faster than ever before. The woman's brutal wounds began closing up within mere moments. Her ghostly pale face slowly caught some healthy color back. She finally fluttered her eyes open and noticed us gathered in a circle around her. Raw fear and deep suspicion instantly took over her expression. Her eyes darted across the armored knights, standing nearby a glowing witch radiating warm healing light, and finally locked onto me, looking down with intense curiosity. She asked who we were with a voice that was hoarse and weak, yet carried a sharp, piercing weariness. This woman had obviously learned the hard way never to trust a soul. Whatever nightmare she had survived on the other side of that barrier had taught her that kindness from total strangers always came with a hidden catch. I gazed down at her battered face and torn up clothes, wondering who on earth this demon woman really was. Some nightmare she'd barely managed to outrun. I'd driven her straight to this choice, opting for the safety of the human-controlled wall, instead of staying put with the beast men. Just that bold move alone made me realize her tale was low-key worth tuning into. Stepping closer, I introduced myself to the battered woman as Count Zhuanghua, the proud lord of Twin Tower City. After letting her know she was trespassing on my turf, I demanded her identity, and the real reason she crawled out of the Beastman lands. Hesitation flickered across her face, prompting me to dig a little deeper, dropping the bomb. I told her I knew she was a demon, so keeping up the act was totally pointless. Those words made her flinch hard, yet I pressed on, laying out my entire thought process. A demon girl would never just randomly end up in Beastman territory, and it was crystal clear she wasn't some basic slave. Traces of magic still lingered around her, faint as they were. She had to be part of some covert faction, operating deep within the Beastman territories. Crossing my arms, I asked what their secret squad had been up to out there. Her eyes went wide as my deduction hit the nail on the head, then her expression turned ice cold. She snapped at me to just end her life or torture her instead of wasting everyone's time. She spat out venomously that she was fully clued into the Human Alliance's shady dealings with the Beastmen, before calling us all a bunch of human trash. Alice's hand instantly slapped onto the hilt of her drawn sword, but I gestured for her to stand down, turning back to the captive woman, to admit that corruption within the Alliance was entirely real, having witnessed it firsthand, though I wanted no part in their toxicity. Motioning toward Elena, I explained she was a witch and my absolute most trusted advisor. Then gesturing to Alice, I stated she was a holy light knight serving as my personal bodyguard. Challenging her logic, I asked if she could picture any mainstream Alliance commander allowing a witch and a temple-bred paladin to work shoulder to shoulder under one banner. She shook her head, slowly in realization, and honestly she was right. Such an arrangement was completely absurd by normal standards, given how the church hunted down witches relentlessly, while the temple literally built the foundation of the Alliance. Those opposing forces could never coexist in any standard human military force, yet right here in front of her, both stood side by side, answering directly to me. I could spot her mental walls finally starting to fracture, even if she still wasn't ready to spill all her secrets, letting up the pressure. I simply asked for her name instead. Softly, she finally gave in and whispered that it was Lilith, a low-level demon chick. Giving a nod, I instructed Aliena to feed her and let her crash for a bit. Before I stepped away, knowing that playing it too aggressive would totally backfire, she was probably hiding some intel concerning an underground rebellion brewing within Beastman territory, and I needed to get my hands on those secrets, though completely on her own terms. Meanwhile, I had other side hustles to manage. The pair of Beastman captives locked up back in Twin Tower City might actually know something clutch. Dispatching Tai Air quickly, I sent word commanding Tai E to turn up the heat on the interrogation of the Beastman boss, NUS. Every single drop of info he could squeeze out regarding Beastman troop movements, tribal politics, and anything tied to their defense line was what I wanted. Standing right by the city walls, I gazed out at the sprawling landscape past the defense line, where a thick jungle vanished into the hazy horizon, webbed with winding rivers and natural waterways. That terrain was obviously loaded with resources, yet the local beastmen were still swinging crude stone weapons and rocking animal furs. They were sitting on a gold mine, honestly completely clueless about what to do with it. That whole region could easily be flipped into a massive breadbasket, a fertile zone churning out enough crops to fuel my total domination across the entire continent. I made a mental note of the idea, knowing this spot was destined to be my ultimate agricultural powerhouse. Suddenly, heavy explosions echoed from deep within the jungle canopy. Not gunpowder, since this world hadn't even invented firearms yet, but high-tier magical detonations. Somebody out there was throwing hands with some serious firepower. Lilith and her shadowy underground faction instantly popped into my head. Demon women were throwing down with beastmen in that exact jungle at that very moment. The enemy of my enemy could easily turn into a low-key valuable asset. A few moments later, Elena rushed over to let me know that Lilith wanted another audience with me. Raising an eyebrow, I recalled how she had clammed up earlier, meaning something major must have shifted. Probably those exact blasts we heard right as I walked in to meet her. The second our eyes locked, Lilith dropped straight to her knees. Every ounce of her stubborn attitude had completely vanished, swapped out for pure, desperate panic. Desperate to save her comrades, she literally pleaded with me to step in. Every single detail was laid out before us. Living as demon women meant they had zero safe spaces left across human society, hunted down relentlessly by churches and viewed with pure terror by ordinary townsfolk. Some had chosen to cluster together out in the desolate Badlands, stretching right between human territories and beastman domains. thus forming a faction known as the Demon Woman Alliance. Keeping a low profile was their initial game plan, minding their own business completely, until a deeply disturbing discovery shattered their peace. Innocent civilians had been secretly rounded up by the Human Alliance and traded off as slaves directly to Beastman tribes. Hearing those words drop, both Alice and Alina immediately clenched their fists in quiet rage. Gross incompetence. Wasn't even the half of it for the Alliance. They were actively running a human trafficking ring straight to the enemy. Lilith continued, revealing that, for the past 10 years, the Demon Woman Alliance had dedicated themselves to covertly liberating enslaved humans from deep inside Beastman camps. Countless lives had been pulled back from the brink, though many of their own sisters paid the ultimate price along the way. Just last night, her strike team targeted a significantly weakened Beastman faction, identifying them as the exact same tribe that dispatched those 500 warriors I obliterated back at Twin Tower City. With half of their fighting force already wiped out, Lilith's squad figured they spotted a major window of opportunity. Unfortunately, the ambush flopped because the tribe housed a dangerous Beastman shaman wielding mystical arts quite similar to those of a demon woman, and proving to be far more lethal than anyone could have predicted, walking right into a well-laid trap. Her squad got pinned down, leaving Lilith to barely claw her way out, while the rest of her sisters remained locked down deep inside hostile territory, casting a gaze filled with sheer desperation toward me. She voiced her awareness of how I had completely dismantled the Beastman army yesterday, firmly believing I possessed the raw firepower needed to rescue her people. She practically begged for my help, though I kept silent for a moment. Yesterday played out differently, with a mystical military talisman backed by 500 elite infantry units ready at my command, whereas today presented just 20 heavy knights alongside 500 standard soldiers. Launching a direct assault on a Beastman encampment hidden in a thick jungle carried entirely different stakes than holding down a fortified stone stronghold, doing that would be totally reckless, prompting me to instruct Lilith to lay out the full intel first. She estimated the total population of the tribe sat around 2,000 individuals, featuring roughly 800 active warriors prior to yesterday's heavy casualties, leaving about 400 combatants still standing, plus that intensely dangerous shaman. Though it was knocked down a peg, it wasn't completely helpless. I was low-key weighing the odds. Over 400 beastmen plus a shaman stinted against my 20 heavy cavalry. The math wasn't exactly vibing for a frontal raid, yet my knights had already flexed that taking down beastmen was a walk in the park. The real wildcard in a face-to-face brawl was definitely that shaman, a total unknown factor packing some serious magic. I threw her a deal. I'd roll in and bail out her crew, but as payback, she had to lock in and pledge her loyalty to me for good. Looking completely shook, she questioned why I'd want a demon woman on my payroll. I brushed it off, saying labels didn't mean squat to me. The fact that her squad risked everything to protect regular humans proved they weren't bad eggs. I'm all about useful allies, and demon magic brought abilities that totally synergized with my current lineup. Without skipping a beat, she agreed on the spot, prioritizing her sister's safety miles above her own freedom. With a smirk, I flicked my wrist, and the demon artifacts I'd scavenged from Leon's hidden basement materialized right in front of her. Drums, bowls, and a bunch of other bizarre gear, all top-tier mystical instruments. Lilith's fingers shook as she inspected the collection, whispering in awe about their legendary grade while asking where on earth I found them. That didn't matter, I told her. The real question was whether she could actually wield them. Nodding fiercely with tears pooling in her eyes, she knew these tools would exponentially supercharge her spellcasting prowess. Sliding the whole stash across the table to her, "They're yours," I dropped. "Consider it a signing bonus for your future services." If we were heading into a showdown with a beastman shaman to rescue her people, I needed my new demon asset operating at maximum power. Staring blankly at the relics, Lilith was starstruck, double-checking if I was seriously handing over all of them. I reminded her she was part of the squad now, and leaving gear like that to collect dust in storage was a waste. Powering her up meant leveling up my own squad. She playfully challenged what would stop her from ghosting with the gear, to which I replied that pulling a stunt like that would only prove I had totally misread her vibe, though I knew deep down she wasn't that kind of person. She flashed a small smile right. Then that was honestly the first real grin I caught from her. A quick brush-up on the relics was what I told her to get into. Since we were shipping out that very night, with a quick nod, she immediately got down to business. Word was sent over to Twin Tower City for Tai to march the remaining knights right up to the defense line, seeing as that wall breach was fully patched up. The city didn't need to hold down a heavy garrison anymore. I wanted every single combat-ready fighter locked in for tonight's mission right on schedule by evening. Tai rolled up with his crew. About Naz, the beastman bigwig, I had to ask, and what intel spilled out during his interrogation, everything Lilith had dropped on me checked out completely, while the new report stacked on even juicier details. Across the wild territory past the 9th defense line, 7 separate beastmen tribes roamed wild. The chief of the biggest tribe out there had a shady backroom deal, running with the Human Alliance trading, captured humans off as slaves in exchange for getting small raiding squads smuggled through the wall. That completely explained Leon's sketchy secret crack in the cliffside, plus those demon woman artifacts stashed down in his basement. The guy had clearly been deep in the human trafficking game. It was also verified by Tai Yi that the Alliance High Command was totally aware of the demon women trading blows with beastmen deep in the jungle. Instead of giving them a hand or grabbing the golden chance to knock down those rival beastmen, the Alliance purposely sat back and watched the show, praying both factions would just wipe each other out. Meanwhile, the top dog tribe of the beast leader, standing as the heaviest hitter of the 7, was totally leveraging the Alliance's total apathy to gear up for a massive all-out coordinated war against human territories. Watching beastmen fighting power up close was an absolute must for me. A much smaller target was on my radar. Orders were dropped to Tai Yi to get the troops fed, geared, and rested. We were pushing out at dawn. No, wait, right in the dead of night while those beastmen were knocked out cold. Maximum element of surprise was the goal. This marked our very first offensive push straight into hostile territory, and I was dead set on rolling out right alongside them. That was a headache for another day, though, because tonight, so I could figure out what kind of monster threat we'd be up against long-term. With Alice having my back, I didn't have to stress about my own safety at all. When the clock struck midnight, I went ahead and summoned my daily knights out of nowhere. 5 extra heavy cavalry units spawned in. It was honestly another insane lucky break. Scoring 5 knights 2 nights back-to-back was unreal. My mounted squad was turning into an absolute beast of a force. Thanks to these fresh reinforcements, I was rocking a total of 30 heavy cavalry units completely locked and loaded for tonight's raid. I got the strike team all rounded up, bringing 30 knights alongside 500 ground soldiers plus Yahello, holding down the healing department, Lilith handling all the heavy magic DPS, and Alice acting as my personal bodyguard as we crept through the shadowy jungle. Heading straight toward the coordinates Lilith dropped, my scouts had already mapped out the entire layout earlier that afternoon. The Beastman tribe had set up camp right in a hidden clearing, with their shabby huts cramped together, and barely any patrols running. They genuinely had no clue a human army was about to pull up on their turf, as Alice suddenly warned me. While we were getting dangerously close, and picking up on a super toxic, powerful energy vibe, which was definitely that Beastman shaman Lilith had warned us about. I told Lilith she was taking the lead on dealing with the shaman first, and if things went south for her, Alice was ready to step up to the plate. Meanwhile, Elena stayed safely tucked away in the back, as our ultimate safety net, ready to patch up any fallen soldiers with her clutch healing spells. That was the exact reason I even dared to push my troops deep into enemy jungle territory, because Elena's intermediate tier healing magic could keep my squad in the fight way longer than any ordinary military force ever could. Without wasting any time, I gave Tai the green light to attack. The entire Beastman camp was totally dead quiet and pitch black, since even savage Beastmen needed their beauty sleep, leaving their defense guards super thin and lazy. Tai didn't bother trying to be sneaky or subtle about it. He immediately ordered the archers to drench their oil arrows in flame and let loose a massive, devastating volley. Hundreds of burning arrows streaked across the dark night sky and rained down hard onto the straw rooftops of the Beastman village. Blazes started popping off everywhere instantly. In a matter of seconds, the Beastmen jolted awake right into total panic, scrambling to grab their weapons and rushing wildly outside, only to realize Tai Yi and the heavy cavalry unit were already tearing through the middle of their camp like a hurricane. Tai sliced the very first patrol guard cleanly down the middle in one brutal swing. Just one swift slash was all it took to unleash utterly brutal blows. Even beastmen who flexed hard on being way stronger than humans got totally outclassed by my system's raw energy. Despite knights charging on armored war horses, the beastmen fought back fiercely, taking them by surprise, since even at death's door, they kept swinging their heavy stone hammers. Some of my regular grunts took heavy hits and dropped, badly wounded, before a wave of green energy washed over them. Thanks to Elena casting her healing magic instantly from the back lines, all their injuries closed up in seconds. Soldiers who should have been benched for good popped right back up and charged forward again, laughing out loud. They felt totally invincible. One guy even yelled that he was totally unkillable before diving right back into the chaos. These were the exact same dudes who used to cower behind walls whenever beastmen showed up. Now, with actual solid leadership, top-tier gear, and a healer backing them up, they were shredding through enemies like absolute demons. That was when the shaman stepped up, an ancient beastman wrapped in a hooded cloak, appeared on high ground clutching a staff, tipped with a glowing purple crystal. He started chanting, and spheres of purple energy rained down over my formations. Wherever those orbs hit my troops, immediately felt their movements drag their limbs, turning heavy as lead. It was a massive debuff covering the whole battlefield, pure magical suppression. So I called for Lilith. She pulled out one of the artifacts I had handed her earlier, something shaped kind of like a stringed instrument, and began firing off her own incantation. Strange and hauntingly beautiful music poured out from the relic, shattering the shaman's curse. Instantly, my soldiers were moving freely again in no time. Spotting Lilith across the field, the shaman recognized her as the demon woman who had slipped away the previous night, and decided to roast her, claiming a single little trinket wouldn't be enough to test him. Before dropping something way worse on us, he called it a forbidden technique, heavenly fire meant to scorch the entire world. A massive magic circle ripped open across the sky above our heads, and purple flames began pouring down like a violent storm. This wasn't just some basic curse anymore. This raw power was straight up devastating. About 100 of my troops were wiped out instantly. Those vicious flames rained down way too fast, and heavy even Alina couldn't pull off miracles for the ones already gone. Outright, Lilith grabbed a turtle shell artifact and threw up a heavy-duty shield over the primary formation. It held on by a thread, while taking a brutal and non-stop pounding. Lilith screamed out that she couldn't keep it up much longer. Heavy guilt was plastered all across her face. She totally blamed herself for dragging us into this mess. I was low-key furious. Losing 100 soldiers in seconds was completely unacceptable. Spinning toward Alice, I dropped a direct order on her. I needed that shaman wiped out. Alice drew her sacred blade. Blinding golden light radiated from her armor, cutting right through the pitch-black jungle. She declared her final verdict in that ice-cold, absolute tone of hers. By the name of holy light, that shaman's death sentence was officially signed. The shaman finally locked eyes on her. Blinding golden beams forced him to squint hard, yet he refused to back down. He barked back that not even a temple knight could stop him. Right then he began channeling another dark forbidden spell. Alice raised her weapon, Holy Light Judgment. Both forces crashed hard against each other. Purple flames clashed against blinding gold. And for a quick second, the whole jungle blazed like noon. That beast-man shaman was genuinely overpowered. Back down in the capital, Alice had easily smashed the bishop's dark magic crafted straight from sacrificed girls. Yet this shaman's forbidden arts actually pushed her to the absolute edge. She couldn't completely shut it down from afar, and I could easily spot the frustration on her face. Then she stopped wasting time on ranged attacks. Planting her boots firmly into the earth, she launched herself straight toward him, moving so insanely fast that even Tai Yi looked shook, spotting her charge coming in hot. The shaman hurled every single spell he had at her, but Alice swung her holy sword with relentless fury, slashing right through wave after wave of magic like a knife cutting through paper. His spells crumbled one by one, until 0 defenses stood between them. He tried to beg for mercy. Alice didn't give him a single opening. One final blow was dealt, and the shaman's mystic energy completely shattered into pieces. The dark purple flames vanished entirely from the upper atmosphere, while that heavy magical aura crushing my troops dissipated instantly, letting Tai Yi casually roll his shoulders to scope out the remaining beastmen warriors before dropping a cold command to wipe them all out. Things wrapped up super fast right after that. With no shaman magic backing them up anymore, the surviving beastmen didn't stand a ghost of a chance against my knights and soldiers operating at absolute peak power. Pushing deep into the beastmen's settlement, we stumbled upon rows of holding cages packed tight with humans, consisting entirely of young guys and girls without a single elder in sight. These were victims the Alliance had traded off to the beastmen right in the camp center stage. 10 women hung bound to wooden posts, covered in nasty whip marks with their outfits ripped to absolute shreds. They turned out to be Lilith's loyal comrades. Those demon women captured during last night's botched rescue mission. Tears instantly streamed down Lilith's face upon laying eyes on them. She quickly checked their pulses and told me they were somehow still breathing. Tai Yi's men were already stepping up to cut them down, even before I could bark the order. I instructed Alina to patch up every single one of them immediately. Tai Yi strode over to deliver his briefing, confirming all beastmen combatants had been neutralized, leaving behind roughly 600 non-combatant beastmen, made up of seniors, females, and kids. He wanted to know what to do with this crew, while Lilith stared right at me, anxiously waiting for my call. These were beastmen, after all, a ruthless species that treated humans like literal livestock and worked them straight to the grave as slaves without a second thought. I made up my mind. I informed Tyrell that any beastman tackling a height above a wagon wheel was getting the axe. Lilith seemed totally cool with this arrangement, figuring the beastman youngsters might catch a break at least. Then I dropped one final detail on him: lay that wagon wheel flat on its side. Lilith's expression froze solid in shock. A horizontal wheel stands barely a foot off the ground, implying that practically no one would be spared. Yet after witnessing what the beastmen had subjected those enslaved humans to, the cramped cages, the brutal whip scars, and the battered demon women, no one could blame me. Not even Alina could muster an ounce of sympathy for them. Let's be real. Those beastmen totally had it coming. Without batting an eye, Tyre acknowledged the command and immediately moved to execute it. Curses were screamed by several beastmen as the sentence came down. Shouting about bloody revenge, they swore humanity would pay big time with a swift sweep of his blade. Tyre shut down the loudest one in the crowd. Their threats didn't mean a damn thing while they were busy torturing human slaves. Mercy was the last thing on their minds now. That the tables had completely turned, nobody was gonna waste any mercy on them either. I strode right over to where the rescued humans stood, stepping forward. I introduced myself as Count Zhuang Hua, the Lord of Twin Tower City, giving them two distinct options. I assured them they were finally free. They could either follow me or head back home to their homelands. Whatever they decided to do, I would totally respect it. Initial relief washed over them upon hearing they were saved, though that joy was quickly overshadowed by sheer confusion. The brutal reality was already known to them. Their very own country's nobles were the ones who had captured and sold them off to the beastmen. Returning home meant risking getting caught and sold all over again. Choosing to follow me meant staying put alongside someone who actually threw down against beastmen. To rescue them, someone who clearly packed enough power to keep them safe. Dropping to their knees one by one, they pledged their allegiance, every single person locked in their decision to stay. The final headcount came down to 237 men and 213 women, making a total of 450 people. All young and in solid shape. With a bit of proper training, they're gonna be an amazing asset to my expanding domain. Every single human slave was liberated by me, as well scattered deep across various beastmen households. The exact same message was delivered to all of them. They were nobody's property to own. They were living people, and now they belonged to my community. Aileen wrapped up healing Lilith's 10 demon woman companions. When I went to meet them, they stared right at me with guarded and deeply suspicious eyes, which was totally fair given everything they had been through. I told them straight up that they'd pulled off an incredible feat fighting to rescue enslaved humans from the beastmen's clutches for a solid 10 years. And honestly, that earned my total respect. The whole arrangement was laid out clearly by me. Lilith had agreed to serve under me in exchange for this. Once the rescue mission was checked off, that deal was officially done. Everyone else was totally free to ghost whenever they felt like it. One of them, clearly the main boss, stepped up to ask if I was deadass letting them walk out. She pointed out that demon women's heads were sitting on juicy bounties from the temple. I let out a laugh, telling her I couldn't care less about blood money. Their raw skills were way more valuable to me than whatever price tag the temple slapped on them. Lilith tried hyping her sisters up to stay with me instead. The leader shut it down, though not out of pure hostility, but out of pure caution. She claimed she needed time to vibe check me and see if I was actually different from other human nobles. She warned Lilith to keep her guard up high as well, no matter how wholesome I seemed. Turning her gaze back to me, she apologized for keeping it so brutally real. I brushed it off with a wave, saying it was cool. Healthy skepticism is always way smarter than blind trust. She'd see the facts for herself eventually. All 10 demon women suddenly burst into shimmering clouds of butterflies and phased right into the deep forest. That escape trick was low-key impressive. I definitely had to grill Lilith about it later. Tyre dropped the update that the beastman's settlement was completely locked down. Right behind the chief's palace sat a hidden storehouse. I marched right in to check it out myself. As soon as my boots crossed the palace threshold, my system kicked on right on cue to flag an unclaimed territory. I locked down the occupation without missing a beat. The soil here was way too fertile and strategically broken to just walk away from. The catch was that it had 0 natural defenses protecting it. To truly secure this turf, I was gonna have to clean sweep the surrounding beastmen tribes next. Though that was a headache for another day. The system pinged a loud congrats for my W and started cooking up a reward. It rolled out a massive drop of 5,000 heavy cavalry. My heart literally skipped a beat at 5,000 mounted knights, which would totally make me unstoppable across the map. Then that annoying static sound abruptly cut the vibe. System error correction in progress. Those 5,000 heavy cavalry instantly got nerfed into 1 heavy infantry barracks. Watching that value drop was pure pain. Getting ghosted by this glitchy system was honestly old news to me at this point. Pulling even a tiny perk out of it still felt like a major W. Every single drop of loot, no matter how low-key, just stacked up my stats even higher. That was when the system completely threw me for a loop, cutting straight through all that static noise. Shards of a voice started echoing in my head. It whispered my actual name, and claimed it had literally been there forever. Before going completely dead silent, for a solid minute, I just stared blankly at the floating interface. Never in my life had this broken piece of code spoken to me directly, at least. Not like that. Whatever weird glitch was going down inside those corrupted files, something was low-key trying to reach out. Stuck on this mystery wasn't going to get me anywhere right now, though. Brand new zone was waiting for me to build it up. Displaced refugees needed a place to crash. My rising army required some serious structuring, and there were still 6 beastman tribes chilling out in the region that I'd eventually have to put in their place, from Twin Tower City all the way past the 9th defense line deep into beastman turf itself. My territory had officially blown up in size. This takeover was moving at light speed now, and I was dead set on keeping the pressure on until there was literally nothing left to conquer. Dropping that heavy infantry barracks was the ultimate clutch move I needed. The system kept the instructions super straightforward: just toss in any healthy, able-bodied rookie. And after just a solid week in the grindhouse, they'd pop back out as elite heavy infantry troopers, fully kitted out with high-end armor and gear, without costing me an extra dime. Cranking out 100 recruits at once was totally doable. In a brutal world where beastmen fighters were physically built different compared to standard human grunts, this military base was going to let me churn out an army of tanks who could actually go toe-to-toe with those monsters stepping into the beastman tribe's supply depot. I couldn't help but feel let down. It was mostly just random wild game meat and forest berries. These guys were practically living like cavemen, even though they were sitting on some of the most overpowered land I'd ever laid eyes on. Then my eyes locked onto something that made my inner gamer drool: a massive stash of raw, hyperpure gold chunks that barely needed any smelting work at all. Just melt it down real quick and stamp it right into currency. Conservatively speaking, we're talking at least 50 grand in gold coins here. Just like that, my payroll budget problems were solved for a long, long time. Every single thing of value got scooped up right into my storage stash before I commanded that the meat be handed out to the rescued civilians, and then I pulled everyone back to the defense line. Even though the conquered territory was super fertile, it remained completely exposed, with zero walls or natural barriers left to protect us if rival beastman tribes rolled up. While my people were still hanging around there, it would have been an absolute bloodbath. Scouts were left behind by me to keep eyes on the area and report any shady enemy movement back. True to form, beastmen hailing from neighboring tribes stumbled upon the wrecked settlement shortly after our departure. Pure rage hit them the moment those dead bodies came into view, yet humans weren't even on their suspect list, since they knew the 9th defense line garrison had always lacked the guts to cross the wall and go on the offensive. Instead, blame got pinned on the strongest local faction, known as the Deer Mountain Tribe, while their aggressive inquiries shook up all the smaller tribes, causing ancient rivalries to spark right back up. Finger-pointing started echoing everywhere, along with heavy reinforcement of their own borders. The beastman factions were literally tearing each other apart without me having to lift a single finger. Talk about a total W. Back in Twin Tower City, the infantry barracks were positioned right behind the Lord's castle by me, and 100 fresh recruits got loaded straight into it. That was when the system dropped a notice stating that a 100 gold coin training fee was mandatory. Not a single word about that fine print had appeared in the initial manual. A quick groan left my lips over the sneaky charge, though the payment was cleared immediately anyway, dropping 100 gold coins for an entire 100 fully loaded. Elite soldiers still felt like an absolute steal once the training kicked off. The barracks doors locked down tight, leaving me with zero way to peek inside or check the progress. Waiting it out for 7 days was my only option, yet once those 100 warriors finally marched out, combined with the 500 summoned troops from my military talisman, a massive force of 600 heavy infantry would be standing by for combat. That gave me enough muscle to storm another beastman camp whenever I felt like it. Dawn broke the next morning with yet another plot twist awaiting my daily summon routine. As the usual heavy cavalry night was nowhere in sight. Out of nowhere, the system cranked out something totally wild: a legit tiger leopard cavalry rider surfacing right before my eyes, straddling a beast that gave off leopard vibes, though built way bulkier than a tiger. Sleek as hell, packing raw power and a terrifying top speed. Slung across the warrior's back was a heavy-duty longbow, while a single sharp blade rested right at his hip. Introducing himself, he dropped the name Chu Feng, proudly claiming the Tiger Leopard Cavalry title. That reference clicked inside my head. Instantly, the Tiger Leopard Cavalry was basically Cao Cao's legendary elite mounted squad, dating back to the epic Three Kingdoms era. A notorious force famous for brutal hit-and-run tactics and lethal mounted archery, Chu Feng wasn't stacked in heavy armor quite like Tai Yi, yet his entire combat build was entirely different. Where Tai Yi flexed on head-on charges and pure brute strength, Chu Fong was engineered for pure velocity flanking maneuvers, and range domination. Both fighters would cover each other's blind spots seamlessly in a scrap. Man, I just wish the system had dropped 1,000 of them instead of one. Some unexpected guests rolled up on me later that morning, bringing word through Ziohe. Lord Tinglin from Finland town had pulled up accompanied by just a single night 0 troops and 0 supply carts in sight. Just the Lord himself and one lone escort. This was the exact same Tinglin whose sneaky locals tried to poison my horses back then, when I was just passing through his turf. That grudge hadn't slipped my mind at all, even if I chose to let it slide for the moment, and now here he was, crashing my place uninvited. Talk about a plot twist. I greeted him right in the great hall, laying on some slick, polished courtesy as he spoke. Baron Tinglin, Lord of Finland town and fellow noble of the Lane Kingdom, claiming he caught wind of the Beast Man raid hitting up Twin Tower City and rushed over to offer help, which made me call him out flat out, asking how many backup troops he brought. 100, maybe 200. All the color drained from his face, because he hadn't brought a soul. Pressing him further about his supply wagons, I turned my gaze straight toward Alina, telling her to double-check his convoy's inventory log. She confirmed he rolled up completely empty-handed. My friendly vibe vanished into thin air instantly, leaving me to drop the truth on Tinglin that he definitely didn't show up to have my back. Bro was literally posted up just to watch me struggle out here. Loki, he was probably praying that the Beast Man would just take me out for good. Or honestly, what if he was secretly teaming up with the Beastman the whole time? Because if that's the vibe, I'd have no choice but to take him down, no cap. Then I'd dig deep and properly investigate whatever shady connections they got going on. Tinglin went completely ghost white, losing all color in his face. Stuttering like crazy, he tried to claim the whole thing was just a massive misunderstanding. He swore up and down that he definitely brought the supplies he promised. We're talking 10,000 pounds of solid grain and 5,000 heavy gold coins, for real. Only catch was that the shipment was still being sorted out on their end. Trust me, it's dropping tomorrow. No cap, it's definitely arriving tomorrow. I relaxed my expression into a chill look. Turning to Alina, I told her to jot down every single word of his promises, using actual pen and paper, obviously. We're running that delivery check tomorrow morning, I dropped into the conversation. And if even a single piece of inventory is missing, I'm rolling up to Finland town myself, personally. To completely clean house and root out whatever corporate corruption was deadass holding these supplies back from delivery. Alina pulled out a legit notebook, pen ready, and started writing stuff down with dead serious energy. Watching her document his every syllable, Tinglin could only offer a stressed, nervous grin. Bro finally realized he was completely trapped in his own lie. He knew there was no backing out now. He literally had to ship those supplies over or face absolute disaster. Dealing with the consequences would be way worse than the actual price tag of the goods. Since his precious supplies weren't even here yet, I gave him the boot, saying there was no point staying for dinner. Bro barely had half a second to even think about protesting before he was suddenly escorted out, finding himself standing stranded out past the heavy castle gates. Whirling around, he suddenly remembered with a shock that he hadn't even managed to talk about the actual reason he came here in the first place. He tried rushing back inside, but Alice instantly blocked the entrance like a brick wall. Trying to plead his case, he stammered that he still had crucial business with me. Alice shut him down flatly, stating that I was resting up and he could just catch me tomorrow. Right as he started pushing back, Alice's hand casually slid toward the hilt of her holy sword. Dropping that signature sub-zero voice of hers, she looked him dead in the eye and asked if he wanted to settle things with hands instead. Tinglin's knight took one single glance at the golden-armored warrior radiating pure, unfiltered bloodlust and killing intent, and wisely dragged his lord backward by the collar. Without dropping another word, they beat a hasty retreat. To be completely real, I had no clue what Ting Wan actually pulled up for, and honestly, I couldn't care less either way. The only thing that mattered was that those 10,000 pounds of grain were finally heading my way, no cap. Plus 5,000 gold coins by tomorrow, no cap whether he had planned on it from the jump or not. Every single neighboring lord who came snooping around my turf would end up way lighter than when they rolled in. That was simply the toll of doing business with yours truly. My domain was blowing up and expanding fast with Twin Tower City locked down as my home base, and the 9th Defense Line acting as my western wall, while conquered Beastman territory served as fresh farmland. 100 elite soldiers were grinding hard in the barracks. Gold reserves were stacking up nicely, and the Beastman tribes across the border were tearing each other apart over who had taken out one of their own kin. Every single piece was clicking into place, plus, tomorrow the system was gonna hook me up with more knights. The barracks would keep pumping out troops. My territory's massive glow-up was just getting started. Sooner or later, the system was bound to drop its next feature. and I'd flex an even crazier level of power. This whole world had zero clue what was hitting them. Tinglin nearly jumped right out of his skin. The second Alice reached for her sword hilt, he and his knight Deadass sprinted out of the fortress, swearing on their lives they'd roll back with supplies. On the carriage ride home, his knight nervously asked if they were actually retreating without securing a single thing, gritting his teeth through the tension. Tinglin snapped that rounding up the grain and gold coins came first, otherwise I wouldn't give him the time of day. He muttered under his breath that compared to the bag he expected to secure from a future alliance, these upfront expenses were small potatoes back inside the warm stone hall. Alina asked me if I genuinely believed Tinglin would follow through. I gave her a hard yes, because before Trenton kicked the bucket, he and Tinglin had obviously been running some shady underground hustle together. Plus, I hadn't forgotten what went down over at Fennel Town. Someone had spiked our horse feed with poison. While we were crashing their right on Tinglin's turf, there was no shot that any local lord was clueless about shady business in his own stables. I had been waiting to settle the score with him anyway, and now he casually walked right into my trap. Uninvited, what a clown. Alina chimed in, asking if I planned to host him again tomorrow. Without missing a beat, I enthusiastically gave him a resounding yes. Bringing carts of grain and heavy gold coins, he certainly caught my attention. Naturally, granting him an audience was a no-brainer. Seeing that bag of cash walk right through my doors felt like free money. Bright and early the next morning, I summoned my daily night reward. Just a single heavy cavalry rider materialized. Coming off the heels of pulling 5 per night twice in a row, this felt low-key disappointing. Dropping back down to just 1 felt low-key insulting. Yet playing the long game meant staying consistent was the true backbone of my system. Even stacking just 1 daily addition adds up massively over time. Alina stepped in to drop the news that Tinglin had finally shown up. Arriving bright and early, his supply wagons were officially accounted for. A solid 10,000 pounds of grain alongside 5,000 shiny gold coins. He delivered precisely as promised, which was a massive W. I had her escort him straight into the study. Tinglin tried to dive headfirst into his sales pitch right off the bat. Before he could ramble on, I cut him off cold. I straight up asked if he had caught wind of the 9th defense line collapsing. Denying any knowledge of the disaster, he immediately tried steering the chat back to his agenda. Stopping him dead in his tracks a second time, I made sure to spell out how those beastmen had smashed through our perimeter and launched a brutal raid on Twin Towers City. Sure, I fended them off this time, but what about the next wave? Finland Town sat right next door to the chaos. If I failed to keep those beasts at bay, his settlement would be the absolute next target on the chopping block. I dropped the bomb that I needed a quota of 500 soldiers pulled from Finland Town. His jaw hit the floor as he protested having only 2 actual knights and less than 200 armed men to his name. Gathering 500 fighters was totally out of the question for him. Clarifying my demands, I told him I didn't need his knights, just warm bodies. Finland Town was a massive, thriving commercial hub packed with a dense population. Drafting 500 civilian men for service should be a walk in the park for a lord with his kind of pull. Unless, of course, he wasn't taking the beastman threat seriously at all. Should that be the case, I'd be forced to assume he was low-key colluding with the enemy. According to both Allied military codes and Lane Kingdom laws, that offense gave me the legal right to try and execute him on the spot. Sweating profusely, Tinglin panicked and swore up and down that he hadn't even stepped foot outside the kingdom, let alone conspired with any beastmen. Cracking a grin, I told him that was music to my ears. So exactly when could I expect those 500 guys to show up? Knowing he was totally cornered, he gave in and agreed, low-key sweating bullets. Though first, he insisted that I listen to his pitch since I'd already secured the bag. Letting him talk felt harmless enough. He began breaking down his whole scheme with Trenton. Tinglin had been secretly hoarding strategic goods from all over the kingdom, like salt iron, and other strictly controlled materials before smuggling them straight to Twin Towers City. Leveraging the border fortress's isolated position, Trenton had been flipping these items to foreign buyers for insane markups, making both of them ridiculously rich, cutting right through his BS. I asked him straight up if those sketchy foreign buyers happened to include the Beastman tribes. Stammering nervously, he claimed he was strictly in charge of logistics. Wherever Trenton ended up offloading the cargo was apparently none of his concern. It was a super convenient excuse, but I kept that receipt in my back pocket. He then pitched me the exact same gig, proposing I take over Trenton's spot as the primary seller while he kept the supply chain running smoothly. He swore bringing in a guaranteed 5,000 gold coins a month in pure profit. Claiming his client list was already locked and loaded. He specifically dropped the names of Knight Commander Leon and Knight Charles hailing from the 9th defense line, as his regular VIP buyers hearing those two names made me want to burst out laughing. Leon and Charles had actually ditched the defense line altogether and fled north days ago. Tinglin had zero clue that he was trying to pitch a business partnership with guys who were already history out at the very outposts where these deals used to go down. His intel was wildly out of date, staring at me with an overly confident, greedy grin. He clearly assumed nobody could pass up this offer, pocketing 5,000 gold coins monthly. He figured I would sell out for the cash. Just like every other corrupt noble he had ever dealt with, I shut him down instantly, giving a hard no with zero interest whatsoever. His face dropped instantly as he tried to argue back, but I gestured for Aliena to show him the door. Slowly rising to his feet, he dragged his feet toward the exit, looking completely defeated. Right then, I called out his name again, whirling around with sudden excitement lighting up his features. He thought I had miraculously changed my mind. I made sure he knew this was just a warning, not an invitation to negotiate. Within a mere 2 days, a massive crew of 500 men had better be deployed straight to Twin Tower City. Should he completely drop the ball, smuggling kingdom resources was going to be the exact charge I slapped him with. Building an airtight case was an absolute breeze for me, especially considering the juicy details he had just spilled regarding his shady salt and iron smuggling hustle. My tight-knit connection with Princess Media got dropped heavily into the chat, alongside the undeniable flex that I had single-handedly rescued King Lance's entire administration. Flicking the switch to put him behind bars meant there literally wasn't a single safe hideout left anywhere across Lane Kingdom where he could escape, his complexion turning completely ghost-white. Stuttering out a nervous mumble that the troops would show up right on schedule, he ghosted the room without uttering another syllable. Leaning in close, Elena pressed me on what my backup plan was if he failed to pull through. Repeating my stance with zero hesitation, I laid it out straight. Any lord who flat-out refused to back the kingdom's defense was getting cancelled, forfeiting both their lofty title and their head in one swift move.